Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Emily was the heiress to a large construction empire, one of the most powerful companies in the country. Her parents, Michael and Sarah Johnson, people of impeccable reputation, always controlled every detail of their only daughter's upbringing. Everything, from education to friends, was under strict supervision. Since childhood, Emily lived in a world of luxury, a large mansion, high ceilings, walls decorated with paintings by famous artists. Evenings full of small talk at long tables became for her an everyday occurrence. It seemed that her life was a perfect fairy tale of a princess, where there was no place for chance meetings and unexpected events. Her parents tried to create a safe cocoon around her, where every step was thought out ahead of time. "You are our only daughter," her father often told her. "We want only the best for you, so we choose your education and surroundings wisely." So she graduated from Stanford University with a degree in international relations and Harvard University with a degree in economics and business administration. Her life was predetermined: a prestigious education, then a position in the family company, and perhaps marriage to someone her parents deemed suitable. At first, Emily agreed with her parents, but as time went on, a desire to know how those who did not belong to this circle of privileged people lived. Sometimes she went to the city unaccompanied, without a guard, without a driver, just alone in her car. It was her little protest against her parents' rules. She would leave the car in the parking lot and take a long walk through the streets where the city bustle reigned. Someone was hurriedly shopping. Someone was leisurely strolling, enjoying the autumn sunshine. Someone was in a hurry, talking on a cell phone. Emily discovered a new world, just as bright and lively, in some ways more natural and different from what she was used to in the street cafes, squares and squares. She felt free from the conventions imposed by luxury. She liked the feeling that no one here knew her, judged her, or expected anything special from her. She began to find pleasure in simple things, in the aroma of fresh baked goods from the little bakery, in the gurgling of the fountain in the park, where she sometimes sat on a bench watching the children running around. One day, during one of her walks, Emily went into a cafe which did not stand out among the many other similar places, chose a table by the window, and with a smile on her face began to watch the passers-by. She was struck by the leisurely pace of the place. She sat for about 10 minutes before a waiter approached her. In the restaurants Emily usually frequented, she would have been noticed by now, apologized, and received a compliment from the chef. But that wasn't the case here. "Sorry to keep you waiting. There are a lot of customers today, and we're short on waiters. Some are in session, some are on vacation. I wish they'd come out sooner, because I work almost without a day off. I come here from one job. I'm a little tired." The waiter smiled embarrassedly. Emily only smiled back softly, feeling how nice it was to talk to people simply. "That's okay. I'm in no hurry to get anywhere," she replied warmly. The guy thanked her and, after taking her order, left. Emily, on the other hand, began to watch the fish in the aquarium that stood across the street. "Beautiful fish, aren't they?" She suddenly heard a man's voice behind her. Emily flinched in surprise and turned around. There was a young man sitting at a neighboring table. Emily looked him over carefully and noted for herself that the man looked ordinary, unremarkable, but there was something calm and deep in his eyes. "Beautiful," Emily replied briefly and turned away. "Tell me, if you were allowed to change just one thing in the world, what would it be? The climate, your parents' world, history, wages, your own or people's thinking, or something else?" Emily turned to the stranger again and raised her eyebrows in surprise, thinking that no one had ever asked her such a question. This was unexpected. Within minutes, she had shut off from the world around her, immersed in herself, trying to find the answer to the question. After a few seconds, Emily answered, "I would change the world for the better." The stranger smiled. "Somehow I knew you'd say that." "Why is that?" Emily asked with a slight squint. "Because people like you can always be seen right away. To me, at least. It's not the first time I've seen you, and I always notice that you can sit alone for hours. No phone, no rush, with a cup of cappuccino and be completely calm and happy. This is very rare nowadays. Everyone's running somewhere in a hurry, forgetting to enjoy the moment. "Have we met before?" Emily asked in surprise. "I have seen you. You've hardly seen me. Do you often walk down the street?" "I do, too. We even sat in the same cafe a couple times." "Really? Small world?" Emily said and smiled. "You even sat today and peacefully watched the fish, as if you were having a silent dialogue with them, understood only by you and them," the stranger replied and smiled. "Wow, how observant you are," Emily said. She felt a warmth spill into her chest. The stranger had managed to notice something that no one around her had ever seen. After all, most of the men she'd been around before valued only status, money, and influence. But rarely had they thought about what it meant to be part of the world, to enjoy its simple pleasures. How do you manage to disconnect so skillfully from external chaos and dive inside yourself? Maybe you were trained in it somewhere, the stranger asked. "Does anyone teach it?" "Of course, there are various energy meditation practices to calm your mind and body while maintaining awareness and mindfulness." Emily shrugged and said, "No, I didn't learn that anywhere. I guess it was just life itself that pushed me to do it. After all, everything comes at the right time and the right hour." "I agree. All in good time," the stranger replied. "My name is James, by the way. What's yours?" "And I'm Emily. Nice to meet you." Emily smiled and asked, "James, don't you think that sometimes life puts too many demands, tasks in front of us?" The man thought for a moment, then replied, "Well, the demands of life are not the problem. The problem is how we respond to them. If we are constantly chasing after something, we lose the basic meaning. But if we stop even for a moment and realize that happiness is in the moment, then a lot of things change. I try to live my life in such a way that I notice every detail around me." James took a sip of coffee, set the mug on the table, and added, "You know, some people look for reasons for their failures, for culprits, complain about the circumstances around them, complain about their parents, about their friends, about their jobs, about the world around them, and change absolutely nothing in their lives. Others find their points for personal and spiritual growth." Those words made Emily think. Maybe that was what she had been missing all this time in her world, where predetermination never seemed to exist, room for the present moment, for pause. They continued to talk as if they had known each other for a long time, sharing their thoughts and observations about the world. James' words seemed simple, wise, and full of meaning to Emily. At one point, Emily looked at her watch and was surprised to realize that she had already spent 2 hours in the cafe. "I'm sorry, James," she rose from the table. "I should get going." Yes. I'm sorry to keep you," James replied, getting up next. "Thank you for the pleasant conversation. Have a nice day." "Thank you very much." Emily was almost to the exit when she suddenly heard behind her, "Wait." She flinched in surprise. Looking around, Emily saw James hurriedly approaching her. "Emily again. I'm sorry to hold you up, but how would you feel about getting together sometime to just walk around town? Why don't you leave me your phone number? I promise I won't call often." Emily, smiling, dictated her number to him and left. As soon as she crossed the threshold of the house, her father immediately began questioning her. "Emily, where have you been?" Father asked sternly. "Have you somehow started traveling unguarded a lot? I don't like it." "Dad, you must have forgotten that your daughter is no longer a child," Emily responded calmly. "Not a child. But the world isn't safe right now, and people aren't either. It's you, daughter, who has forgotten what kind of family you were born into." "Dad, what does it matter what family a person was born into? It's what's inside that counts. Some people are born and brought up in a family of alcoholics and grow up to be successful and kind people. And some are born into a well-to-do family and grow up to be evil and vindictive." Emily frowned and added, "Thousands of people walk around unprotected and they're fine." "Emily, you're looking at the world naively. Half the people in our city are just ordinary working people, poor people. They're not interesting. They don't need security. That's our family. So be on your guard." Dad, I just want to live like everyone else. Walk the streets alone, unprotected and unafraid, and not even think that something could happen to me. I want to hang out with all kinds of people, not just the ones you and Mom pick out for me. Dad raised his eyebrows upward and said sternly, "Wow. How did you talk? What's the matter with you?" "Yeah, there's nothing wrong with me," Emily sighed. "I just don't like the way you divide people into bad and good, rich and poor. There are people we enjoy talking to and being around, and there are those whose worldview and way of life is different from ours. But that doesn't make them bad, they are just different. Even if you don't like some person, you can just stop communicating with him, but belittling him is wrong. Every person is different." Emily moved a little closer to her father and said, "And actually, I don't think it's normal to walk around with guards all the time. Emily, have you forgotten what happened to the daughter of Robert, my friend? I told you how she once went to a disco without security. Like you, she said there was nothing to be afraid of, but people like us always attract attention. It's a good thing she's alive. It was an isolated incident. Life is unpredictable. You can have an accident with a guard or slip in winter, break a leg. No one's immune." With those words, Emily walked over to her father and hugged him. "Daughter, I just love you so much, and I want you to be okay." Emily clung to him silently, feeling both love and inner contradiction at the same time. 3 days later, Emily left on a business trip to Miami for a week. Despite her busy schedule and official work, she always found at least a little time to be alone, to walk the streets of the city, to see the local sights. All this allowed her to feel some freedom of action, which she sometimes did not have at home because of her parents' control. On the last day of the business trip, tired but satisfied that all the work tasks had been successfully completed, Emily packed her things in the hotel. It was a few hours before her flight home when suddenly her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from an unfamiliar number. Emily immediately frowned, but smiled as she read the text. It was James, a stranger she had met at a coffee shop a week ago in her town. They had exchanged a few messages and agreed to meet up after Emily returned from her business trip. After every work trip, Emily took a couple days off to relax. This time was no exception. On one of the days, she decided to meet up with James. "Meet me downtown at the main entrance to the park," James suggested in one of the messages. "Great. Would 5 p.m. be convenient for you?" Emily clarified. "Pretty much. See you then." At the appointed time, Emily, slightly worried, walked up to the entrance of the park. James was already there. Upon seeing her, he smiled. "Good evening. Good to see you," he said, stepping closer. Emily smiled back at him. They walked down a quiet alley in the park, enjoying the fresh air, the light rustling of leaves underfoot, and occasionally touching each other's elbows as if by accident. Emily noted to herself that James was friendly and easygoing. It seemed to her that they had known each other for years, so easy and natural to talk to him. "I was born and raised in a very ordinary family. I live with my parents in a small house," James told her. "I work as a programmer in a small company. I'm happy that I chose this specialty." "Yes, very. When I was still in high school, I firmly decided that I was going to be a programmer. What field do you work in?" Emily hesitated for a moment, as if trying to find the words. "Yeah, I work for my dad's construction company," she answered and quickly looked away, hoping James wouldn't notice her embarrassment. For some reason, she didn't feel like telling James that she didn't just work for her father's company, that she was the heir to a huge construction empire, and that her parents were very powerful and wealthy people. She realized that being frank about her family could change her relationship with James. She wanted him to know her as a simple girl without all the big names and statuses. James, unsuspecting, merely nodded. "Construction is serious. You must have a lot of interesting projects going on." Emily smiled, hiding her thoughts behind her smile, and replied briefly, something like that. "Do you want ice cream?" James suddenly suggested as they approached a small kiosk. "I wouldn't say no." They each bought an ice cream and continued walking, engrossed in a leisurely conversation about the world around them and everyday trivia. "Would you like to ride the Ferris wheel?" James suggested. "Come on," Emily smiled. It's been a while since I've been on a ride. Me neither, James admitted. It's a great excuse to reminisce about childhood. As the cab went up, Emily suddenly remembered coming here with her parents as a child. They still lived in a regular apartment back then and traveled without security. A lot had changed since then. How I've missed it, Emily said suddenly, looking somewhere in the distance. Why exactly? James inquired. For this kind of simple and ordinary human pastime. And how do you usually spend your free time? Emily laughed again. She didn't want to tell James about her life at the mansion, the frequent banquets, the meetings at her house that had long since bored her. Mostly at home, she answered evasively. I read a little, draw. Do you like to cook? James asked. Emily was confused. In all her years, she'd only made scrambled eggs a few times and a charlotte once, and that she'd thrown it away because it didn't turn out well. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends on how the day went. If there was a lot of work to do during the day, Emily lied for some reason. What do you do in your spare time? I read too. I go to yoga, and on the weekends I help my parents with home renovations. You go to yoga? Emily wondered. Yeah, why does that surprise you so much? Well, I just thought it was mostly women who went to yoga. But we have just as many men as women in our group. Yoga has changed me, made me rethink a lot of things. Do you play any sports? I went to Pilates a couple times, but I didn't like it. Strength training is not my thing. I prefer to just do exercises at home. I also like to walk a lot. It's the best kind of activity for me. They both laughed, feeling how easy it was for them to talk to each other. After that meeting, James and Emily began to spend more time together. They often walked around the city, went to cozy cafes, and shared funny stories from their childhood. Even when Emily went on a business trip, their communication was not interrupted. During the day, they were constantly texting each other, and in the evening they called each other via video link, telling each other about their day. One day Emily thought about how different she and James were. They'd grown up in completely different households, had different financial resources and educational backgrounds. And yet, they always had something to talk about. But there was something that really bothered Emily. It was the fact that she was hiding from James that she came from a well-to-do family. At the same time, she was tired of hiding her life on the side, her warm, heartfelt connection with James from her parents. She realized that she couldn't go on like this for much longer. A couple times she had even tried to talk to James and her parents and tell them the truth. But every time she was about to do that, something stopped her. You know, Emily, I'm so glad we met, James said one day as they sat on a bench in the park. You're kind of special. I could talk to you about anything in the world. Emily rested her head on James' shoulder and gently replied, You're the one who's special. I can be my real self with you. A few months passed. It was a normal work day. There was an hour left before the end of the workday. Emily made one last work call, sent a few emails to business partners, and hurriedly began to get ready to meet James. They were going to have an evening of entertainment, a trip to the theater, dinner at a restaurant, and a night out on the town. Every meeting ended the same way. They got into their cars and went home. This evening was no exception, and nothing unexpected was expected. As soon as Emily stepped through the threshold of her parents' house, however, she was met by her father's stern and disgruntled gaze. He stood with his arms crossed over his chest and his lips pressed tightly together. Emily immediately remembered that her father only pressed his lips together like that in moments of intense anger. Hi, I bought a cake. Why don't we all have tea together? Emily asked, as if nothing had happened. Cake you said you bought. What are you doing back so late? Where have you been? Her father asked her sternly. Well, first at work, then I went shopping for a while, Emily lied. Her father stepped closer to her, stared intently into his daughter's eyes and said reproachfully, Emily, I never thought you were capable of such a thing. She squirmed. Her father had always been a leader both at home and in business. He was strict but fair, and his opinion mattered to her. Dad, what are you talking about? She asked. Her father sat back in his chair and said sharply, I didn't expect you to get to this point. I thought there would always be a sincere and trusting relationship between us. But now I realize how wrong I was. Dad, I don't understand you. You speak in riddles. And why are you talking to me like that? And I'll tell you why. I know you've been seeing this guy named James for months now. Emily turned pale and, feeling her heart pounding frantically, asked in a trembling voice, "Have you been following me?" Her father smirked, stepping closer. "Of course. Did you think I wouldn't notice how you've changed lately? You've started staying late. You have to go to the store. You have to go to the dentist. You're late at work. I had to find out why you've been letting the guards go so often. You even showed up late today and said you were at work and shopping. Emily, where's the shopping? I only had time to buy one cake. Do you take me for a fool?" Emily stood in a daze, not knowing how to react to the whole situation. Her father didn't give her a moment to think. Continuing his monologue, "Mom and I have been dusting you off since you were a kid. Give you the best education that others can only dream of. You're smart, successful, beautiful, and self-sufficient. You can afford anything you want. And now you're caught up in this poverty. Emily, you're going down the wrong path." Emily flared up, feeling resentful at the injustice. Her father's words hurt her more deeply than she could have imagined. She continued to listen to him. "How could you ever go against my will? I have told you more than once that I am strongly against you traveling without guards." Her father's voice grew louder. "Where did you even find him? I mean, his father works in a factory and his mother is an elementary school teacher. There's no such thing in our circles." Emily, barely holding back tears, quietly replied, "Dad, James is a very good man. He's kind, smart, caring, and we love each other. Just because he's not from our circle doesn't make him any worse." "Love?" Father almost shouted out. "You love someone who can't give you anything. You should be with someone who is up to your level." Emily raised her eyebrows in indignation and, gathering her wits, replied firmly, "I don't owe anyone or anything. I want to be with someone who accepts me for who I am, understands and cares. James is exactly that kind of person. I don't think you know what you're saying at all. He certainly accepts you for who you are and cares because he knows what kind of family you come from. I can imagine how happy he is to have seduced such a rich girl." "Dad, what are you talking about?" "For the record, James doesn't know where I live or what family I was born into at all." Dad thought for a second, then asked, "How doesn't he know?" Emily shrugged and replied, "Just like that. I just told him that I work for my father's company. And who you guys are, I didn't elaborate. So you shouldn't think badly of him. He's a very decent man. Emily, I'm totally against you and him meeting. Call him today and tell him it's over between you two." Her father told her sternly. "Dad, I'm not going to do that," Emily said as calmly as possible. But inside her everything was boiling with resentment. "What matters to me is a man's inner world. What does he say? What does he think? How does he feel about me? What are his values? And the material component, it's a matter of gain. Yes, he works as a programmer in the office and will sit there all his life. Are you going to carry him on your shoulders all his life to provide for him? No one is going to be pulling anyone anywhere," Emily replied. "Dad, you always put money first and then everything else. But money can't buy love. And anyway, do you want to see your daughter happy or do you want to prove a point?" "Emily, of course I want you to be happy. That's exactly why I'm saying this man isn't for you. You'll be bored with him later. You're used to living in luxury and he can't even take you to Europe on his meager salary. Call him today and end the relationship." "Dad, that's impossible. We love each other," Emily said calmly. "So you're going against your father's wishes. All right, then I'll break off your relationship myself." Emily squirmed. She just couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Dad, but why are you doing this to me?" Emily said tearfully. "I thought you would always understand me and protect me from all adversity, like you used to. And now you want to create conditions to make me unhappy." "I want to create conditions and, on the contrary, to warn you against the biggest mistake of your life." "But that's not a defense," Emily raised her voice. "Your whims will make not only me unhappy, but James as well." "I don't want to hear anything about him," barked her father at Emily. "And I don't want to hear any more about James not being right for me. Emily said loudly. At that moment, Sarah came down from the second floor. What's going on in here? Why are you yelling like that? She asked, seeing Emily all in tears. She put her arms around her. Daughter, what's wrong? Then she looked at her husband and said sternly, Michael, explain to me what happened. Why is our daughter crying? Let her tell you herself. Emily's father replied dryly and quickly began to go up to the second floor. Emily sank down on the couch and burst into tears. Mom, I can't do this anymore. This is not a normal situation. You and Dad are constantly controlling me. Where am I? Why am I late? You choose my friends, tell me what I can and can't do. I can't make any decisions on my own. When will you finally realize that I am no longer a child, but a self-sufficient, successful individual? Emily, I understand you, but try to understand your father and me too. You're our only daughter, and a long-awaited one at that. Mom, I understand, but I can't go on like this. I need freedom of choice. I want to live my life the way I want to live it, not someone else's. Emily, but we're not someone, we're your parents. I agree that Dad can be very strict, but in this situation he's right. This James is no match for you. Emily's eyes widened in surprise. And you knew about our meetings with him too? Of course I did. But you see, Emily said sadly, you control me everywhere and in everything. It's not normal. Do you realize that James and I love each other? Daughter, but realize at last that things are beautiful between you two right now. Beautiful even because you met, went for a walk and broke up. And when people live together, it's different. And what can that programmer give you? Mom, this programmer has a name, James. I told Dad, and I'll tell you that you and Dad won't be able to separate me from him. Mom made a serious face, paused for a few seconds, and then said, That's up to your father to decide. Emily jumped up sharply from the couch and ran to the second floor, shouting to her mom, Tell Dad that he won't be able to separate James and me. Emily lay awake, pondering what she should do now. She knew very well that her father was her man of his word. If he said something, he would definitely do it. In the morning, Emily woke up with a heavy headache, but with a clear plan of action. She decided to finally talk to James and tell him the truth about coming from a well-to-do family. That same evening, as Emily and James sat in a restaurant, Emily hesitantly said, I'd like to talk to you and tell you something. He put his fork down on the table and made a serious face. James, you may have noticed that I very rarely talk about my parents. So, today I'd like to talk about them. Yes, I've noticed. But if you don't want to talk for whatever reason, you don't have to. I'm totally cool about it. All in good time. That time is exactly today, Emily said firmly. But I'm afraid that after you find out who my parents are, you'll change your attitude toward me. I love you and I want to live with you. Problems with your parents? James replied and smiled. But I was even just wondering who they were already. My parents are very influential and wealthy people in town, Emily said. James said, is that what you wanted to tell me? Not only that, I wanted to tell you that my parents and I live out of town, and that before I met you, I always traveled with security. But when we started dating, I started letting the guards go. Emily, why do I need to know all those details? And she continued, I kept it a secret from my parents that you and I were dating. So I let security go and told them I was late at work or at the store. But somehow they found out that you and I were seeing each other. And last night at home, my dad gave me a hard time, said we weren't right for each other, and insisted that I break things off with you. I guess your parents think it's not that we're not right for each other, but that I'm not right for you. Too poor, James said calmly. I'm sorry, Emily said guiltily. I'm ashamed to admit it, but they're very protective of me, controlling and filtering my surroundings. That's why I haven't told them anything about you. I don't understand why you thought that finding out would change the way I felt about you, Emily. I've loved you and I'll continue to love you. And I can't imagine my life without you. And I love you just the way you are, no matter who your parents are. Yes, it would be nice if I had a good relationship with your parents, but you can't make love happen against your will. So for now, it's just the way it is. Hopefully, in time, they'll reconsider their attitude towards me and see that I genuinely love you." He paused for a few seconds and said, "Emily, you just don't take offense, but you're very dependent on your parents. Since that happens, I know, but I can't change anything yet. You know, I'm so worried about you and our relationship because Dad said he would do anything to break up with you and me." He smiled, hugged Emily, and said quietly, "You don't worry about me. What can he do to me?" "Well, he won't kill me. I'm sure he's not capable of such a thing. Especially, I don't think he wants any trouble himself. James, still, please be careful." They hugged each other. Further events unfolded even more unpredictably. It had been a week since the last fight between Emily and her father. They hadn't communicated, but Emily realized that her father wouldn't just let it go. One day, Emily and James agreed to meet after work at her favorite bakery. When she got there, she noticed right away that James was depressed. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "No, I'm fine. Just something's giving me a headache." "Never mind," replied James. But all evening he was immersed in his thoughts. At first, Emily thought it was from fatigue, but when his mood didn't improve the next day or 3 days later, Emily began to feel uneasy. At one point, it even occurred to her that the reason James was so depressed might be because of her father. And when she returned home and saw that her father was more furious than ever, her suspicions were only heightened. He didn't say a word, only cast glances at her that were full of anger and threats. Those looks only made Emily shrink away. A month passed like that. One day, while in the office, Emily heard a knock on the door. Yes, come in." "Emily Johnson, there's a courier here to see you," the secretary informed. "A courier?" marveled Emily. "But I didn't order anything." The secretary smiled enigmatically and asked, "Shall I tell them to drop it off?" Emily didn't have time to answer anything as huge baskets of white roses began to be brought into her office. As the flowers were brought in, Emily sat in amazement. When the courier and the secretary left, she smiled, got up from her desk, and walked over to the baskets. She began to touch the flowers, savoring their fragrance. In the baskets were small cards with texts. Emily began to read them. "You are the best thing in my life. When we met, I knew immediately that we were made for each other. You are the most beautiful woman in the world. I look forward to seeing you tonight at the restaurant at 24 Oak Street at 7 p.m. Emily smiled, thinking James. Spent the rest of her time looking forward to an evening with her lover. After finishing her work, she fixed her makeup and, satisfied and happy, headed to the restaurant. But when she got inside and the waiter escorted her to a table, she was in for a surprise. At the table sat not James, her favorite, but Thomas, her former boyfriend, with whom she had broken up a year ago. Emily froze in place, eyes widening in surprise. Thomas stood up, walked over to her, put his arm around her waist, and kissed her cheek like nothing had happened. For the first few seconds, Emily couldn't get a word out. "Emily, I want to apologize to you for everything I said to you a year ago. I thought about us a lot and realized I was wrong. I paid too little attention to you because of my job, and I think that's why you and I broke up. It's been very hard for me without you all this time. I'm sorry, please," Thomas said. Emily felt her palms sweating. She pulled herself together and asked, "So you were the one who sent me all those white roses?" "Of course. Who else would have known that white roses were your favorite? Just like I gave them to you before, I will continue to give them to you now," Thomas said confidently. "Thomas, do you really think you can disappear from my life and then suddenly appear, apologize, send me flowers, invite me to a restaurant, and everything will work out between us?" Emily asked, ironically. "I understand you're resentful of me, but give me time and I'll prove my love to you." Emily smiled and said, "You don't have to prove anything to me. Nothing more can happen between us. I'm in a relationship now and I'm very happy." He grinned. "I know you like the back of my hand. Your new suitor just doesn't stand a chance. I wonder if you don't care about me. Then why did you come here?" Emily laughed, then replied firmly, "Because the cards didn't say the flowers were from you, so I thought they were from James." "So your new man's name is James?" he asked with a chuckle. "That's none of your business," Emily said as cut off. "Don't send me any more flowers. Don't call me, and don't interfere in my life. All the best to you." With those words, Emily stood up and headed for the exit. Narcissistic type, Emily thought to herself, feeling an unpleasant residue from the recent encounter. The next day, she gave orders to throw all the roses out of her office. A few days later, as she was about to go to bed, she heard the sound of an incoming message. When she saw James's name on the screen, she smiled, but when she read the text, she frowned. "I can't keep quiet any longer. Maybe you'll have some free time tomorrow morning to meet with me. I want to talk to you. We need to work things out. It's better for you and for me." She put the phone away and began to wonder what it was that James was going to talk to her about. His behavior over the past week had been very puzzling as it was, and this message kept her up until midnight. They agreed to meet at their favorite bakery. When Emily got there, James was already sitting at a table. His face was tired and grim. "Sweetheart, what happened? I stayed up until midnight thinking about you. If it was so urgent, you could have talked yesterday and on the phone," Emily said, taking a seat across from him. He didn't say anything back to her. Silently, he pulled some kind of envelope out of his bag and placed it in front of Emily. "What is it?" she asked anxiously. "Open it." She took the envelope with trembling hands, and when she opened it, she was numb. Inside were pictures of her and Thomas together. All of the pictures had been taken exactly a week ago at a restaurant when Emily had traveled there on a date, thinking James would be waiting for her there. For a couple minutes, Emily was in emotional shock. She immediately guessed that someone had taken those pictures on purpose, and only someone who needed to take pictures of her near Thomas so they could show them to James. It suddenly dawned on Emily, so my father set it up. They worked together. He had Thomas send flowers to the office and invite me to the restaurant. He hired someone to take pictures of me with Thomas at the exact moments when he put his arm around my waist, kissed me on the cheek, and held my hand. Emily thought back to the 20 minutes she had been in the restaurant with Thomas. Everything inside her was boiling with resentment. While Emily reviewed the pictures, James had been patiently silent. "Sweetheart, it's not what you think." Emily couldn't stand it and cried. "I went to the restaurant thinking you were sitting there." "What nonsense," he said. "My dad set the whole thing up. I told you he once said he'd do anything to ruin my relationship with you. And he's a man of his word. That man in the pictures is named Thomas. We had a relationship. We broke up a year ago. He works with my dad, and I understand that my dad asked him to play the part of the man still in love with me. That day, a courier brought a very large basket of roses to my office. And in the basket were cards and invitations to a restaurant. And I was sure it was you, James. I love you so much, and I just couldn't do that to you." Emily raised her voice a little, wiped away her tears, and added, "I was shocked when I walked into the restaurant and saw him. He apologized, said he realized his mistakes, and that he would do anything to prove his love for me. But I told him that I'm in a relationship now, and I'm very happy, and that nothing can happen between us. I didn't even have dinner with him. I just told him to stay out of my life, got up and left. He purposely put his arm around my waist, kissed me on the cheek, and stroked my hand so that he and I would be photographed in those moments. My father just needed the pictures to show them to you. It was done intentionally so that we would have a fight." With those words, Emily placed her hand on James' arm and added, "I'm not lying to you. Please say something to me and forgive me. You're the one who forgives me for doubting you. I didn't find myself when I saw those pictures. You know, the day I got them, I had no idea your father was capable of such a thing. You should have thought about it." James sighed heavily and added, "There's something I need to tell you too. Just promise me you won't tell your father, so as not to aggravate the already complicated relationship between the two of you." Emily was wary, and James continued, "Remember a week ago you asked me why I was so moody, and I also said at the time that I had a headache." "Yeah, I remember. You've been so aloof all week. The thing is, your father came to visit me a week ago." Emily froze with surprise. "Really? Why?" "Turns out he knows everything about my parents, about me, where we live, where we work. He was well prepared for our meeting. When he arrived at my house, He made me an offer you'll probably be shocked by. James paused for a few seconds and then said, "Your dad offered me $50,000 in exchange for me stopping seeing you." Emily raised her eyebrows upward and exclaimed, "How could he? What does he think he's doing? He thinks money can buy everything. How low and mean of him." Emily was seething with indignation. James continued, "He was sure I would take the money. And when I refused, he became furious and started shouting and threatening me. I tried to stay calm, but at one point I almost started screaming myself. He left angry and disgruntled." Emily lowered her head, digesting what she'd heard. She knew her father very well, but she couldn't imagine him being so obsessed with ruining her relationship with James. "I'm afraid for you," Emily said. "I'm afraid your father won't stop there and will come up with an even more insidious plan. Your dad is certainly a powerful man in town, and with his connections he can do a lot of things. But I don't think he'll do anything else. After all, he probably doesn't want to ruin his reputation. I'm not sure." James took Emily's hand and said, "I'm not afraid for me, I'm afraid for you. I can see the pressure he's putting on you. All of this is certainly affecting your emotional state. I'm afraid that in time he'll convince you that I'm not right for you." "James, what are you talking about? My life is mine, and it's up to me to decide who I want to do it with. I have loved you, I love you, and I will love you. And not Dad, not Mom, not anyone else can change my mind about the rightness of my choice." James smiled and said softly, "Well, then I have nothing to worry about. I love you very much too." When she got home, Emily shut herself in her room and cried, thinking about her life and James' parents. She still couldn't believe what her father had done. On the one hand, she wanted to tell him, but she realized that it would only make things worse. So she decided not to escalate the conflict, but to go on with her life. A week passed. One evening, after finishing her workday, Emily slowly made her way to the parking lot. As she approached her car, she froze in place. There was a large poster hanging on the windshield of her car, and on it in big letters was written, "I love you very much. Marry me." For a couple seconds, she stood motionless. "I told Thomas to leave me alone and stay out of my life," Emily thought angrily and began to tear the sign down. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her that made her tense up a little. She turned around and widened her eyes in surprise. James was slowly but surely approaching her with a huge bouquet of flowers. "You?" she asked quietly. "Yeah. Who were you expecting?" James smiled. His voice was full of warmth. "Well, it's just that I'm already dreading these surprises from my dad and from Thomas," Emily admitted. James stepped closer. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about us. You are a very important person in my life, and I can't imagine my future life without you. Yes, I grew up in a simple family. I don't live in a mansion, and I'm not a businessman, but an ordinary programmer. But I truly love you, and I want to spend my life with you. Marry me." With those words, James held out the flowers to Emily. She couldn't hold back her tears. For several minutes they stood in silence, breathing in unison. And at one point Emily asked, "James, doesn't it bother you that my parents are adamantly opposed to our relationship?" "Sweetheart, it bothers me that it bothers you. But I want you and me to learn to live on our own, without the pressure and interference of our parents. That we always talk to each other, discuss whatever is bothering us, support and trust. I think that's the right thing to do. I really hope that in time your parents will reconsider their attitude towards me. But wait, you haven't given me an answer yet." "Do you agree to me?" James asked, smiling. Emily wiped away her tears and replied, "Of course I agree. I love you very much too, don't I? Only I think I should still let my parents know that we want to get married." "Yes, that would be the right thing to do. But Emily, I'm begging you so much. No matter how your parents react to this news, and no matter what they say, please stay calm. Take care of yourself and know that I love you very much." The next day, coming home from work and gathering all her will in a fist, Emily walked into the kitchen, sat down across from her parents, and said quietly but confidently, "I need to talk to you." Emily's mom smiled and asked, "Would you like to have dinner with us?" Thanks, I'm not hungry. Dad put his fork on the table and asked sternly, "What did you want to talk about?" For a moment, Emily felt everything inside clench. Her heart was pounding frantically, but she realized that this conversation was inevitable. "How long are you going to be quiet?" Father asked Emily sharply. "I wanted to tell you that James and I have decided to get married," Emily said, noticing the immediate change in her father's face. There was silence in the kitchen. Emily's mom froze. Her gaze darted between her daughter and her husband. Emily met her mother's gaze, then looked at her father and saw his face darken. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked coldly, squinting his eyes. "No, Dad, it's not a joke. We love each other and we want to be together. We've made this decision together." Dad rose abruptly from his chair, his voice shaking with anger. Emily and her mother flinched. "I warned you, Emily. Do you know what I think of him? That beggarly tramp is no good for you. You're making a big mistake. This is my life, and I'll make my own decision on who I want to have a relationship with. You can't control me forever." Emily raised her voice at her father for the first time in her life. "Let's all calm down and talk calmly about everything. We're all family people after all," Mom muttered. "Calmly?" Emily's father said sharply. "She's like a stubborn donkey. She can't hear a thing." He wiped the sweat from his forehead and shouted, "I won't let my daughter tie her fate to some loser." "Dad, haven't you had enough of what you've done? All your devious plans are already ruined. And if you do anything more against me and James, they'll be ruined even more, because we love each other." "And what did he do?" Emily's mom inquired. "Don't you know, Mom? It's weird. How could Dad keep something like that from you?" Emily grinned. "He put my ex-boyfriend Thomas up to it, arranged for me and him to meet at a restaurant, hired a man to film us together. All this only to send James pictures of me supposedly cheating on him, which can't be true. Dad also offered James money to get me up, but all his plans failed. James and I are still together." "It's all lies," Dad shouted. Emily widened her eyes and pulled an envelope of pictures out of her bag and said, "Lies? Shame on you, Dad. And here are these pictures." Emily's mom opened the envelope and began to look. With each passing second, the expression on her face changed. "Michael, I never thought you would do something like this. It's really cruel, isn't it?" she said. "Then that's it," Dad said sharply. "Don't give me any life lessons here. I tell you for the last time that I am absolutely opposed to this marriage. We don't need that ragamuffin here. He only wants money. Don't you understand, Emily?" "Dad, you're imagining things. James and his parents are very decent and good-natured people. I've met them before. Yes, they're simple. But that's not important at all, is it?" "What is important?" Father barked. "What matters is a man's inner world, what it's filled with. Papa, but how can you not realize what you're doing? A big mistake. That you're creating the conditions to destroy the relationship between James and me, between me and you. Why? James and I are going to get married anyway, aren't we? To know how simple you have it. A man's inner world, what is it filled with? Naivety and rose-colored glasses. I don't believe in your love. You're very different. He needs your money, and you probably fell for him out of boredom. It'll all come out in time. Dad, I'm tired. I'm not going to argue with you anymore. I've set you straight. I'm getting married. I'd love to see you at my wedding." "Now you listen to me, daughter," the father said firmly. "If you have already decided to build a life with this beggarly tramp, then from today I am blocking all your bank accounts. Let your programmer provide for you from now on. Live on his salary and yours. And one more thing, your mom and I won't be at your wedding." Emily suddenly remembered James' words. "No matter how your parents react to this news or what they say, please stay calm. Mom, Dad, I loved you guys very much and I love you. And I will always love you. I'm more certain now than ever that I've made the right decision and that I want to commit my life to James. And that's my choice. And if you're against our wedding, then please, it's your choice." Emily looked at her mother, hoping for her support, but she only looked at her husband confusedly, afraid to anger him more by her intervention. Realizing that she wasn't going to get any support from her parents, Emily silently got up from the table and went to her room. Surprisingly, she felt better after that conversation with her parents. Perhaps it was because she'd finally told her father everything she'd wanted to say for a long time, or because she realized once again that her parents didn't approve of her choices. And that meant that now she had to learn to live her own life and build relationships without their control, pressure, or support, just as James had wanted. In her heart, Emily wished her parents were there for her on her big wedding day. She suddenly remembered how, as a child, they had often acted out family skits where she was the bride. The groom was Moshi the teddy bear. Dad would escort the bride down the aisle, and Mom would sit and sing the wedding song. These memories brought tears to my eyes. It will be different in real life, Emily thought to herself. She realized that she had a new life ahead of her with James, full of love and happiness. There might be some minor difficulties, but the most important thing was that they were together, so they could handle everything. As Emily lay in her bed and reminisced about her childhood, her parents were in the next room discussing their daughter's upcoming wedding. "Michael, I have to tell you that your actions towards our only daughter are simply unacceptable. How could you possibly think of offering James money, talking to Thomas, hiring a photographer and sending James pictures? You're a powerful man, intelligent, successful and a happy family man. And you make such devious plans, it's just not serious," Sarah said reproachfully. "Sarah, haven't you seen this beggarly tramp?" replied Michael Johnson irritably. "Michael, you know I've always tried not to demean people of lower income. You, on the other hand, have always let it slip. Realize that every person has a different life story and circumstances. We're all different. You were born into an ordinary family too. And when I met you, you weren't rich." "Yes, I wasn't, but I got 2 college degrees and worked hard, so now I have what I have. And what is this programmer going to give our daughter? He lives in a small, crumbling house with his parents. Emily's used to living in the lap of luxury. Are you saying he's going to buy her a house or an apartment on his salary? Sarah, I'm sure he wants our money. Or maybe his parents are encouraging him not to miss his chance to get rich. Michael, you've already made up a whole soap opera. What makes you think they want our money?" Emily said they're simple, kind people. And a lot of times people like that aren't mercenary at all. They're used to simplicity, and luxury is not their lifestyle. Michael, you're risking ruining your relationship with your daughter by being stubborn. She's your only daughter. You've always called her my little princess. And now, when she's about to have a big moment in her life, you're leaving her alone. It's not right. Yes, James may not be the man you want Emily to be with, but that's her choice. They love each other, and even if, as you believe, she makes a mistake, let that mistake be its own lesson." Sarah fell silent, looking at her husband's serious and thoughtful face. "Let's go to bed, or it's getting late. Good night," he said. In the morning, Emily woke up before everyone else, had a quick breakfast, and drove to work. Her thoughts kept returning to the fight with her father yesterday and the upcoming wedding. A little later, her mother came down to the kitchen, prepared breakfast, and made herself some coffee. Soon, Michael Johnson showed up. He walked into the kitchen and sat down at the table. "Sarah, I stayed up until midnight. I kept thinking about what you said to me last night. Some of it I agree with, and some of it I strongly disagree with. That's why I have a new plan. Wait, listen. I've realized that pushing Emily isn't the best option. If we want to maintain a good relationship with our daughter, we need to do things differently." "I'm afraid to even imagine what plan you've come up with," Sarah Johnson said. Michael took a sip of water and continued. "I thought long and hard and realized that you and I don't know anything about James' parents. We don't know how they live, what goes on in their family, what their relationship is like, let alone whether or not they're mercurial. Why do we need to know anything about James's parents? It's not like we're living with them. Why would we? A lot of things are passed down from parents to children. Behavior patterns, family values, habits. If Emily's going to marry James, she needs to know what kind of parents he has. Like Emily said, it's more about the inner person. I think Emily is in love right now, looking at everything through rose-colored glasses, so everyone seems good and kind to her." "I don't see where you're going with this," Mom said. "What I'm getting at is that you and I need to get to know James' parents better. And to do that, you and I are going to go tricky. I want me, you, and Emily not to be judged by our looks and the thickness of our wallets. So I suggest we dress up as simple hobos and come to their house. Emily's mom widened her eyes in surprise. Are you out of your mind? What are you suggesting? You're some kind of imaginary person. Why put on such a circus? And then to see how they treat beggars. If they show cruelty and indifference to us, it will be a signal to us that James is not worthy of our daughter. And I'm sure that's exactly what will happen. Michael, what if they give us a warm and welcoming welcome? Well, I'm 100% sure it will soar, Dad said firmly. And I'm not so sure about doing it all. You and I are grown men, and we're going to dress up as beggars. I'm even laughing at what you suggested. It's like a kindergarten. So, let's say James's parents get violent with us. Then what happens? Emily's going to marry James anyway. If they're cruel, then I'm going to be cruel to them, Michael retorted. That's no way to treat people. It will all come back. But his father pretended not to hear his wife's last words. Sarah, we have a makeup artist coming over tomorrow morning to give us images of dirty old tramps. I've already made arrangements and we'll drive over to James' house tomorrow and pretend we need help. Mom only shook her head and sighed heavily. She knew her husband very well, and if he made up his mind about something, then he would do it anyway. The next morning, a young makeup artist arrived and did their images. When she left, Emily's parents looked at themselves in the mirror and couldn't contain their laughter. So creepy and believable did their new images look. Their makeup, their clothes, it was all terrifying. All the way to James's parents' house, they were silent. Michael Johnson parked the car farther away so they wouldn't suspect anything. My hands are shaking. Still think it's a stupid idea, Sarah Johnson said. Finally, they approached James's modest house. Through the small low fence, they could see a woman squatting in the vegetable garden, digging something. Michael Johnson knocked on the gate. The woman rose to her feet and looked carefully at the unexpected guests. She walked slowly toward the gate, keeping her eyes on them, and when she reached the gate, she scrutinized them from head to toe. Emmeline's father was about to chase them away, but the woman calmly said, "Hello, did you want something?" "Yes, we need help. We have no one to turn to. Our son kicked us out of the house, and we've been living with our belongings for months." "Your son kicked you out?" the woman interjected, frowning her eyebrows. "He brought a woman into the apartment, and they started squeezing us out, and then they just put us out on the street with our suitcases." The woman stood silent for a few seconds, mulling over what she had heard, and then asked, "What do you want from me? Perhaps you have something to eat and drink?" Michael Johnson stood waiting for the woman to chase them away, but the woman calmly opened the wicket gate and said, "Come inside. You're not going to eat outside." Emmeline's parents looked at each other and followed her. Once inside, the woman said, "Wash your hands. Sit down at the table." Michael Johnson and Sarah Johnson looked at each other again. Silently, they washed their hands, sat down at the table. The woman put plates on the table, cut bread, sausage, and vegetables, and said, "Just made borscht. Get the sour cream." After a few seconds, she asked, "So what do you plan to do now?" "Fall is coming soon, then winter. You won't be wandering the streets all your life." Emmeline's father shrugged, then said, "We don't know yet. We're trying to talk to him calmly, but neither he nor his woman are making any concessions." The woman sighed heavily. "Yes, it's not a pleasant situation. It's a shame when parents and children have misunderstandings like that. They are the closest people to each other. You have to take care of each other, because life is very unpredictable. You never know what awaits you tomorrow." "Yes, I agree," Emmeline's father replied briefly. "My husband and I also have a son. Truly, we have a very warm and cordial relationship, and I am so glad of that. Now he wants to get married. True, the girl's parents are categorically against their wedding. They say my son is poor and not a match for her. I don't understand why two loving hearts should be prevented," the woman said sadly and shrugged her shoulders. At that moment, Emelina's parents tensed up. Well, maybe they want the best for their daughter. Maybe he really isn't right for her. Emelina's mother interjected into the conversation. I don't know. My husband and I might think this girl is a little out of our league too. She grew up in a well-to-do family, and we're simple people. But I've never once told my son about it, because I think he should live with her, not me. The girl is beautiful, very kind, cultured, and you can see from her how she sincerely loves my son. Emelina's parents ate their soup in silence, and the woman continued. My son said that Emily's parents will not come to their wedding. It's very sad, but they will get married anyway. They are young people. I talked to my husband and we decided to take out a loan and help build a small apartment for the newlyweds to live in separately. And that Emily, probably, with us will not be very comfortable because she is used to live in other conditions. And in the house of her parents, James cannot appear. So my husband and I will slowly pay for the loan just so that the children will be well. Well, I want to give you some sincere advice. At this point, the woman looked at Emily's parents. I don't know what kind of relationship you have with your son and his woman, but in any case you should forgive, make peace, and appreciate your relatives. Thank you for the advice and for feeding us, Michael Johnson said. We should probably get going now. At that moment, the front door opened and a man walked in. For a moment, tension hung in the room. He walked leisurely to the table and said to his wife, You didn't tell me we were having guests, so I didn't know anyone was coming over myself. People have difficult life situations. Their son kicked them out of the house, so I invited them over for dinner. James, the father, looked intently at the guests, then at his wife and said calmly, So if you have nowhere else to go, you can stay with us for a couple days. We have an annex to the house with a separate entrance. There's a couch in there. Michael Johnson and Sarah Johnson looked surprised and tensed. No, thank you very much, but we'll be on our way, Emily's mom said and got up from the table. They all got up and went outside. Emily's parents gave another thank you and headed to their car. As soon as they got to the car, they immediately started discussing the whole spectacle that they themselves had put on. So, Michael, are you calm now? Are you convinced that these people are very simple and not at all self-serving? You know, Sarah, I'm just amazed that there are people like this left in the world. It's just amazing. You know, it's hard to surprise me with anything. But today they surprised me with their kindness and their simplicity and their hospitality. They didn't even say anything about our appearance and dirty clothes. Moreover, they invited us to their house and to the table where they themselves eat. And they also offered us a night's lodging, despite the modest conditions in the house. And this despite the fact that they don't know us at all. Sarah Johnson looked at her husband and noticed tears in his eyes, but pretended not to notice anything. Sarah, Michael Johnson continued, This is probably the first time in my life I've ever felt so ashamed of my actions, of everything I said to our daughter, of trying to ruin my relationship with James. I'm even glad that you and I made this circus today and came here dressed as homeless people, because these people made me realize I was wrong. They said such right and wise things about forgiveness, reconciliation and appreciation of relatives, and that life is very unpredictable and you never know what will be waiting for you tomorrow. It seems like they said what you know, but just today, because of those words, I realized a lot of things. Emily's mom smiled, took her husband's hand, and said softly, Michael, I'm so glad you realized that. And Michael Johnson continued, And what struck me most of all was that these people live in a modest little house, but are willing to take out a loan to build an apartment for our daughter and James. They are willing to give the last of their money just to make them happy. What a fool I am. I almost ruined my daughter's happiness and my relationship with her, my beloved. The most important thing is that you realized all this in time. They drove home in silence. That evening, when Emily returned from work and walked into the kitchen, her father said, Emily, we need to talk. She tensed, remembering their last fight. The last thing she wanted right now was a repeat of the conflict. Emily, I want to apologize to you for all the hurtful words I said to you and James, and for trying to ruin your relationship. I love you very much, my little princess, and I will always love and worry about you. That's why I've been so fiercely protective of you from all harm. Please forgive me. Mommy and I would love to meet James. Emily felt tears fill her eyes. She silently walked over to her father and hugged him, resting her face against his shoulder. Her mom stood beside her and smiled, looking at her family with love. The next day, James arrived at Emily's house for dinner to meet her parents. The evening passed in a relaxed, cordial atmosphere, as if everyone had known each other for a long time. Emily's father was eager to ask James questions about his life, and Emily's mom was supportive of the conversation and the young one's plans. It seemed that this meeting was not just a formality, but a real step towards a new relationship and family harmony. After James went home, Emily took her parents' hands and gently said, "Mom, Dad, thank you for everything, for what you do for me, for life, for your love, care, and protection. I'm so glad I have you." Preparations for the wedding lasted 2 months, and the whole period was full of worries and joyful moments. To make sure the newlyweds didn't worry about anything, Michael Johnson took care of all the financial expenses of the wedding. A lot of guests were invited to the wedding. On the side of the groom were only the closest relatives, and Emily's parents called their family friends, business partners, and distant relatives. Emily noticed that at the wedding her dad not only didn't shy away from James's parents, but showed them special attention. He approached them constantly, chatting amiably, referring to their words in conversation with the other guests. This gave the event even more warmth and emphasized that the wedding united not only two loving people, but also their families. Despite the difference in wealth, as a gift Emily's parents gave the newlyweds a trip to Europe, and when they returned from their honeymoon, Michael Johnson announced the happy news. "And we've already started construction on your house. Sorry that without your knowledge. And while your house is being built, live with us. We'll be very happy to do that. And all the construction costs are on my mom and me." "Mom, Dad, you're spoiling us," Emily said. "As long as we're alive, we'll spoil you," Michael Johnson replied. And a few days after the wedding, James went to live with her parents. One evening, sitting on the terrace, Emily quietly said, "James, do you know, I don't know what has affected my father so much, but he has changed a great deal." James looked at his wife curiously and asked, "What do you mean?" "He used to be a lot tougher, but now he even talks differently, kinder and gentler somehow. I'm so glad things have improved between us all, and that your parents come to visit us often." "I'm glad too, love." James hugged her. "I'm glad your parents finally realized that our feeling with you is genuine." 6 months after the wedding, Emily and James gathered their parents for dinner to tell them the happy news. There was excitement in the air, but no one could have guessed what the news would be about. "We have gathered you here to inform you that you will be having a grandson or granddaughter in 9 months." Everyone froze for a few seconds and then began congratulating Emily and James, unable to hold back tears. "This is the best news ever. We're so excited," James' parents exclaimed. "Well," added Emily's father with a smile, "it looks like we'll soon have another little princess or prince in our family." Emily's entire pregnancy has truly felt like a princess. James and her dad were incredibly caring, often asking how she was feeling, bringing fruit, asking what to buy. Emily gave birth to a baby girl. Michael Johnson arrived at the hospital first. When he entered the room, Emily held her daughter in her arms. When the father saw her, he said quietly, "Well, now we have 2 princesses." Emily saw tears in his eyes. Emily's parents and James' parents came to meet Emily from the maternity hospital. Everyone was smiling in anticipation of meeting the little girl who was now part of their family for the first time. When they arrived home, a celebratory dinner was waiting for them. Everyone sat down at the table to celebrate this joyous occasion. The room had an atmosphere of family coziness and warmth. Emily noticed how her father kept watching her granddaughter, who was quietly sleeping in the cradle. His eyes were full of love and awe. Emily felt a special bond forming between her daughter and her dad, something invisible, but very strong and heartfelt. In the middle of the evening, Emily's father rose, holding a glass of juice. His voice came out with a slight tremor, but with a firm conviction in every word. "I'm so glad to have you," he said, looking at the faces of his family. "You are the most beloved people. My family is the most precious thing I have. After all, that's what happiness is all about, having your closest loved ones by your side in both joy and sorrow." The room became quiet for a moment. Everyone felt how these words touched their hearts. No, he won't, answered Bobby briefly. I once sat on my mom's grave for 3 whole days and he didn't even notice I was gone. Yes, and now he's in town looking for money for a bottle. Then he'll find vodka to drink. He'll be with his drinking buddies. They fight and fight so much that I'm afraid to sleep. I hide in the storeroom, and there are mice running around. This story made Alex Chandler's hair stand on end, and his ailment seemed nothing compared to what this little boy was experiencing every day. And then Alex felt that for a whole hour he felt neither pain nor weakness, and that made him happy. It looks like Emily is sending me a sign from above. This kid is going to bring me happiness. Are you 2 brothers? So you're going to be my uncle, Bobby asked when he had finished all the desserts. He looked at Alex and Timmy carefully. Do you 2 always go out together? No, we're not related, Timmy said. Just happen to be. By the way, Timmy, Alex said, I have a handyman position opening up at the farm. Why don't you come work for me? I'll give you a place to live. Will the guest house suit you? Sure it will, Timmy exclaimed. You won't regret hiring me, will you? I can do everything. I can build, I can plumb, and I can take care of the garden. And what kind of kebabs can I cook? You'll love it. Then it's a deal, Alex smiled. But you, Bobby, are coming to live with me. Still asking Alex, Bobby rejoiced. Can I call you that for now? Alex nodded and found he wasn't even dizzy. His mood was at an all-time high. He certainly wouldn't be bored now. Now that's dominant, Bobby exclaimed in admiration, cocking his head upward. You could fit a whole school in here. And there's an arrow spinning on the roof. Look, Timmy. While the new tenants were getting acquainted with the house, Alex went to look for Jessica. There was no one in the greenhouse, and only the carriage stood lonely by the open window. Having gone around all the rooms, Alex found his assistant in the garden. She was lying in a hammock reading a book. Jessica, from this day on we will have new tenants. My son Bobby and the handyman Timmy now. You won't be bored either, but it'll be more fun at home too. What son? Jessica wondered. The future one, Alex smiled. I'm going to go make dinner, Jessica answered and smiled strangely. Alex noticed it, but thought he was imagining it. What luck to feed such a bunch of people and clean up after them, Jessica thought with annoyance. That wasn't the deal. You said the smell of that flour you brought back from Colombia would poison him quickly. Jessica was angry, speaking over the phone. The man in question was still alive, though he could barely move. For 10 whole months she had labored like a horse here. Whoever was on the other end of the line asked her to calm down. Jessica pulled herself together, smiled and turned to go into the house. That's when she ran nose to nose with Bobby, who was looking at a bird in a tree. Maybe he'd heard everything. Are you playing spies? The boy asked with interest. What kind of spies? Jessica wondered. Well, you just said on the phone that you had to kill someone. I figured as much, Bobby replied simply. That's my business. What am I playing at? Jessica shouted. Weren't you eavesdropping? Curious Varvara turned around and walked away, leaving Bobby with his mouth open in surprise. The boy sincerely did not understand why he had offended this aunt. Half an hour later, Timmy got under Jessica's hot hand and decided to tighten the faucet in the kitchen. My name is Timmy, he introduced himself as he entered. I fixed the faucet. Why didn't you call the plumber? There's plenty of work for him to do around here. It's lucky I'll be here now. So everything will be fine. There's a purple savior, Jessica snickered. Where'd you come up with that? Redheads. Why are you picking on Alex? Spongers? You watch your mouth. He took Timmy's hand in Arizona. You probably don't work for a day's labor either, so you can't talk like a human being. How come Alex keeps you here or don't talk to him? And Timmy left the kitchen. And then he refused to go to lunch, not wanting to eat food prepared by such unkind hands. The next day, Alexa decided to visit her family lawyer, as the case was too sensitive for a phone conversation. In the morning, though, he woke up again broken and with a feeling of heaviness in his chest, forced himself to swallow a piece of toast and got into his car. At the law firm's office, his lawyer, trustee Nicholas Graham, was already waiting for him. Is something wrong? The elderly lawyer asked, helping Alex to a chair. Yes, the man said, barely breathing. Tell me, has my wife approached me about adopting Bobby? She did, Nicholas Graham answered, but she wanted to keep it a secret. That's why I didn't tell you, Alex, you see. As it turned out, Emily couldn't have children because of a fatal hereditary disease that was passed down the female line. Her grandmother and mother got over it, but Emily didn't. She didn't want to tell you so she wouldn't worry. And then she met this kid, a redhead like you found him. I couldn't find him, even though I looked for him. Yeah, he found himself, Alex said. But how come? Emily didn't say she was sick, and she didn't even look sick. I didn't want to bother you, the lawyer replied sadly. I mean, you've been so busy. The news would have knocked you out, but then I would have spent more time with her and wouldn't have argued over nothing. Alex grabbed his head. And even though Emily ... what's done is done, Nicholas Graham sighed. But now you'll have a son to pass your business on to. I've seen that boy. He's a good, funny kid, Alex answered quietly. His head was dizzy from such news. So this car accident had spared Emily the agony she was about to suffer. You could say that the lawyer shook his head. The disease was incurable. There was little chance of recovery. She realized it, but she held firm. The doctors gave her only 6 months. That's the way it was. Alex cried. The tears wouldn't stop. Nicholas Graham put his arm around his shoulders. They sat like that for a long time. Each of them remembered his own grief. When Alex returned home, he got an unpleasant surprise. There was swearing in the kitchen, during which Bobby's shrieking and Jessica's voice stood out the most. Alex was surprised that a nice, quiet house helper could be so shouting and rude. "Get out of here," Jessica shouted. "Don't be a housekeeper. You broke an egg, and now I have to mop the floor." "But you pushed me, didn't you?" Timmy justified himself. "You knocked the groceries out of my hands. I was going to fry myself some eggs." "I'm in charge." "You can't have 2 masters in the kitchen," Jessica yelled. "You don't want to go through other people's fridges." "But Bobby asked you to give him something to eat. And you ignored him," Timmy said. "So I thought I'd feed him, and I need to eat before I work in the garden." Breakfast was at 8:00. That Bobby should have gotten less sleep, Jessica whispered. "The kid's on vacation." "He's getting enough sleep," Timmy stood up for the boy. "Why are you so angry anyway?" "It's none of your business who you are." When Alex entered the kitchen, all argument stopped instantly. Timmy went outside and Jessica obligingly said, "Alex Peterson, are you hungry? Shall I cook something or serve a ready-made diet meal?" "No, thank you." "Better feed the boys and I'll go get some rest. I've had too much going on today." "And can you please explain to me why you're fighting with Timmy? He steals food." "He doesn't pay for anything," Jessica started, but Alex interrupted her complaint. "He has a right to come in here and take whatever he wants. And so does Bobby. I told you yesterday, these are my new tenants. And Bobby's about to officially become my son. The lawyer's getting the paperwork drawn up." "Good," Jessica replied sullenly, frantically thinking about what to pack, "and that Timmy of yours has been hitting on me." "How?" Alex was surprised. "When did he do it?" "This morning," Jessica said resentfully. "He's so insolent. You have no idea." "All right, I'll talk to him," Alex promised. When he told her what the maid had told him, Timmy was speechless with indignation. He resented his master for believing Jessica. Bobby, for his part, stood up for his friend, telling him how Jessica had chased him out of the kitchen, called him bad names, and then attacked Timmy. Alex was caught between 2 fires and decided to watch for now. But Jessica still found a way to pull the blanket over him. One day, when only Timmy and Jessica were in the kitchen, she suddenly screamed like a wounded elephant and started tearing her clothes. Timmy thought she had spilled hot sauce on herself. He started to help her take off her apron, but she suddenly dug her nails into his face. The pain made him scream. A panting Alex Peterson came down screaming. The rush had taken a lot out of him, so he was breathing hard. "What happened?" Alex asked, looking around the kitchen. "He attacked me," Jessica exclaimed, crying crocodile tears. "He started tearing my clothes. I had to defend myself. If it hadn't been for you, he would have abused me." "What are you talking about?" Timmy screamed. "I didn't touch her. I thought you were a guy for ripping your sweatshirt." Alex just shook his head. He'd known Jessica longer than Timmy had. That's why he believed her. "You're going to have to leave," he said quietly to Timmy. Alex left the kitchen, and 5 minutes later Timmy was gone. Timmy was hurt that Jessica had been able to make him look like a monster, even though she was the wolf in sheep's clothing. "Where are you going to go?" Bobby asked. "I won't be lost, don't worry. See how it turned out," said Timmy. "And you, buddy, be careful and keep an eye on that Jessica. I don't like her. My heart tells me she's up to no good." "Okay," Bobby nodded and hugged him. Bobby took Timmy's words to heart. He followed Jessica like a shadow everywhere he went. One day, when Alex wasn't home, she put the plant in front of the open window again. While Jessica watered it, she talked quietly to it. "Grow, big poisonous one." "Well done, flower. You're crushing your host little by little. You're also smart. You do damage selectively. You don't touch me. And thank you. Too bad your poisonous pollen doesn't work on that nasty boy." These words were clearly heard by Bobby, who was hiding behind a plant. He was thrown into a fever. He was both afraid and happy to know that Alex's illness was the fault of a plant that was easy to get rid of. When Jessica left the greenhouse, Bobby approached the dangerous plant. "So that's what you are, scarlet flower," Bobby said. He sniffed the round red flower. It smelled like dirty socks and something else nasty. Pinching his nose, he threw the pot with the plant out the window. There was the crunch of a broken vase. "You puppy," Jessica shouted. "Why did you throw away such an expensive gift? Take this, you filthy tramp." Jessica swung at the frightened boy, but her hand didn't have time to touch the child. Alex held her tightly and looked his maid straight in the eyes. "I will not allow children to be beaten," he said dryly. "But he's being naughty," Jessica started to justify herself. "That boy destroyed your wife's flower." "I remember all the flowers Emily used to buy." "Do you know why?" she asked. "Yes, She had such an innocent habit, and that stinking cactus you brought into the house. I didn't realize before why you were lying to me. It's poisonous, Bobby shouted. It stinks and it's poisoning you. Uncle Alex, she told me when she was watering it. I heard her. So I threw it off the second floor. That's a good boy, Alex said. Bobby shuddered and felt goosebumps run up and down his body. Pack your things and leave, Alex said stiffly, turning to Jessica. She ran away frightened, but Bobby stayed behind. Uncle Alex. I think she set Uncle Timmy up, Tui said. Definitely need to get him back. He slapped himself on the forehead. But in the meantime, I need to find out something else. And Alex again asked his father's friend Nicholas Graham for help. He listened attentively and not without horror to his godson, and asked only one question. When exactly did Jessica appear in your house? 2 months after Emily's death. Literally the same day I told my partners I wanted to hire an assistant, Alex replied. And what about Emily? It was suspiciously quick, Nicholas Graham reflected. My spouse has been looking for a domestic helper for at least a month, and then Alexa steps in. We need to think about it. Later that evening, Nicholas Graham called his mentee. Can you believe this Jessica of yours turned out to be Buchanan's own sister? Remember him. But the one who was always dissatisfied with everything and made hasty bad decisions. Did you have to kick him off the board of directors? And he swore revenge on you then? He sure was, Alex marveled. So he's the one behind the poisoning. Yes, Jessica brought that weird flower that's banned from Latin American homes. It poisons whoever is affected by its pollen contained on the long stamens, not these flowers. Fascinating. It can. And you can't prove anything. There was no poison in the blood tests, and the flower was already thrown away, Alex exclaimed. How are you feeling now, Alex? Nicholas Graham asked. Great, like I've always been like this. Didn't even notice, said Alex. That's because you don't notice your health, explained the family friend. As the years go by, you only notice its absence. We're in my 30s, and the men laughed heartily, shedding the weight of worry and pain. At lunch, Alex and Bobby ate what they could make themselves, along with bacon pizza and sweet rolls. You stay for the host, Alex said in a businesslike tone. Where are you going? Bobby asked. We gotta track down Timmy. I feel bad for them, sighed Alex. By evening, Bobby had made some dumplings he found in the freezer and was waiting for Alex. He was hungry, and even the unpleasant smell didn't deter his appetite. So he decided to eat alone for a while, reassuring himself that Alex was just late for work. But as the clock ticked past midnight, Bobby got scared. What if he stayed here alone? After sleeping through the night, the boy, convinced that the owner of the house was still gone, decided to go to the person who could help him, and so he went in search of Timmy. Timmy was where he had been before, but only a little tipsy, probably drinking out of resentment, sitting on a brand new bench by Emily's grave. When Timmy saw the boy, he got excited. Oh, who's here? What are you doing here? Did Uncle Alex go looking for you yesterday? He didn't come here first thing. No, Timmy perked up. Did something happen? And then Bobby told what he knew, not leaving out the slightest detail. What a bitch, Timmy exclaimed, sobering up in a flash, and she made me look ugly too. I knew there was something wrong. I gotta go find Alex. Let's go. The first thing they did was head to the police station and report a missing person. The officer on duty smelled the odor of booze. Citizen, he said, go and wake up. Maybe you drunkenly thought your imaginary friend had disappeared, or maybe you just have a white fever, so I can organize you to the sobering up center. Let's go. Timmy realized that this wasn't going to get him anywhere, so he decided to go another way. Where did Jessica live? He asked. They didn't know, but they knew in their gut that she had something to do with Alex's disappearance. What are we going to do now? Bobby was frustrated. I'm the only one who found the file, so he's missing too, he said. You've never called him that before. Timmy was surprised. What's changed? I miss him, Bobby said, his lips quivering. It's okay, we'll find your daddy, Timmy reassured the boy. They didn't go back to Alex's house, but stayed at the old lady's house, where Charlie had kindly let them stay. But they went to watch Alex's house as if they were on a job, hoping that they would catch the thread and unravel the whole tangle of strange happenings. And the next night they were lucky. Jessica was on the doorstep of the house, and she opened the door with her own key without hiding from the neighbors, who thought it was just a maid coming to clean the house. Bobby was tempted to yell something hurtful at her, but Timmy explained that they were spies and were following a criminal. Bobby liked the game. Half an hour later, the former maid left the house holding a small suitcase. Then she got into a car and drove off somewhere. When Timmy and Bobby entered the house, they noticed that the safe was open and there was no money in it. Jessica simply robbed Alex by peeking at the lock code. Obviously, Bobby and Timmy would not have had time to catch up with her, and Jessica would have noticed that she was being followed. So Timmy asked a friend of his to run the license plate number. In a few minutes, the boys knew Jessica's address and calmly drove to her house. They went around the back of the building and heard muffled conversation. Was someone arguing in the basement? Let me go or it's going to get worse. You'll answer to the law for everything." Alex's voice was heard. "And you on the jury laughed at first," Jessica said. "Didn't I tell you I have another trump card up my sleeve? And this time I'll use it and win your head. What's not to like? I liked cleaning up after you." Alex could hear himself getting sick. "But that's it," Timmy said. "It's time to call the police. Now we have all the evidence." A SWAT team arrived and rescued Alex, who was already unconscious, and an ambulance crew snatched the resting man from death's grasp. Alex's lawyer quickly found all the loose ends and made sure Jessica, along with her brother, ended up in the dock. They got decent sentences. The case was closed, but none of this pleased Bobby and Timmy, who were on duty at Alex's bedside day and night. "What are we going to do?" Timmy asked. "Would he live?" "If he gets a blood transfusion, he'll make it," said the attending physician. "But we don't have that rare group right now," he said. "Would mine work?" Timmy asked. "I was told in the army that I have a rare blood type." "I don't know what military unit I served in. I lost my military ID a long time ago." But then the doctor said, "To the treatment room," and he hurried after the nurse. Timmy's blood was a match, and what's more, it was identical. "Would you like to do a DNA test for compatibility?" The doctor asked. "I have a vague suspicion that you and Alexa Chandler are close relatives." Timmy agreed, remembering how Bobby had once referred to him and Alex as brothers, as if they came from an orphanage. There was a great desire to find any of the relatives. While Timmy was working, Alexa's DNA results came back. "What do you mean, a sibling?" Alex's mouth dropped open in surprise. How could that be possible? Nicholas Graham had to unravel the tangle of unusual events. Timmy came in the evening and went straight to Alex's room. "How are you? How are you feeling? You've had a lot of my blood, so don't be surprised if you feel like riding a motorcycle," Timmy laughed. "Thanks, brother," Alex said quietly, tears in his eyes. "What did you say?" Timmy was surprised. "Are we really blood brothers?" They hugged each other, not believing their happiness. The loneliness was over. Now they had someone to talk to about their day, and to be sure they would be understood and supported. Everyone needs a family, and Bobby stood there, happy for them, wishing he could be welcomed into the family too. "Come here, buddy." Alex held out his hand, and Bobby ran up and hugged both brothers. "May I interrupt your idyll?" came the cheerful voice of Nicholas Graham. "There's news. First, Bobby is now officially a Chandler. Secondly, you were both born to a student who abandoned you because she couldn't feed you. Her trail is being lost overseas. But here's the weird thing. You were separated as infants. Alexa was adopted by a wealthy couple. The director of the orphanage wanted Timmy, so she hid the fact that Alex had a twin brother. But the director died of a heart attack shortly before the adoption, and Timmy stayed at the orphanage, Alex explained. It was no big deal. We're together now," everyone in the room shouted happily. "Quiet, or I won't be able to sleep." A pretty girl on crutches entered the room. "Excuse me," Timmy said, and deftly took flowers out of the vase. "These are for you, beautiful princess." The girl smiled. "More like Baba Yaga, since I'm limping. My name is Marina." Timmy escorted Alex's neighbor to her room. "Look, sister, we got flowers," Marina exclaimed. "Wow, orchids, I love them," said her exact copy. "So you are also twins?" Timmy asked. "What do you mean two?" Marina was surprised. "Alex and I found out today that we are twin brothers," Timmy explained excitedly. "Can you imagine?" "Wow," exclaimed Sonia. "By the way, who is the other brother?" "Let's go to her room. We have a lot of interesting things to tell you," Timmy suggested. The girls gladly agreed. When Alex saw Sonia with orchids in her hair, his heart sank. She was beautiful. Maybe this is all for a reason. Maybe Katie is giving me a sign that it's time to stop mourning her and start moving on with my life, Alex thought. Strange, but this girl likes orchids orchids too. "My name is Alex," he introduced himself to Sonia. "My name is Anna," she answered and blushed. She definitely liked this young man with sadness in his eyes. And when she learned the complicated story of his life, she fell in love completely. So after she was discharged from the hospital, the two couples formed. Timmy walked under the arm with Marina, and Alex with Sonia. Between them and holding everyone's hands, walked Bobby, thanks to whom this tangled story came to a happy conclusion. 3 months later, the Chandlers had a double wedding, to which Charlie was invited, of course. Seeing the happy faces brought tears to his eyes. He was happy for Alex and Timmy, who were finally out of the black. "Congratulations, Dad," Bobby said in Alex's ear, and hugged his father. An expensive foreign car stopped at the gate of the city cemetery. The guard, recognizing the owner of the car, ran out to greet the important visitor. "Charlie, are there any workers here? I'm going to need some help. I want to clean up Emily's grave." A young man in an expensive suit came out of the car, leaning on a stick. "Not before you," Alex Peterson Charlie replied. "It's been almost a year. Have you lost weight? Are you sick?" "Boredom. Both, Charlie." Both Alex answered thoughtfully and headed toward the tombstones. He had no strength to walk to his wife's grave, but overcoming his weakness, he walked carefully, stepping and leaning on his stick. "I don't worry about the workman," the watchman shouted after him. "I'll send him to you as soon as he's done with his business. His name is Timmy." Alex nodded his head and moved on, carefully stepping over the unevenness of the path. He was feeling particularly unwell today. But Alex put it down to the excitement of the sorrowful memories. Charlie stood for a moment, looking back at the Alex he remembered forever. He'd never remembered such a lavish funeral in his life, and he'd worked as a cemetery caretaker for 30 years. That day, a young woman, Alex Chandler's wife, was being buried. The crowd was enormous, and there was an ocean of flowers. The mahogany coffin was carried on his hands, and behind him the husband walked, grief-stricken. As they began to fill in the grave, Alex suddenly climbed down and lay down beside it, asking the men to bury him with his wife. Several men dragged the dying Alex out of the hole as he sobbed and screamed the name of his beloved. He had to be held down until the ambulance paramedics arrived and heavily sedated him. And then he only cried and complained bitterly to his Emily. "Who did you leave me for?" The men around him, seeing such heartbreaking grief, could not hide their tears. And Alex's subordinates were shocked by the behavior of their boss, who at work was considered a tough and demanding, but at the same time a fair manager. Therefore it was they, his colleagues and friends, who later ordered a sculpture for his grave from a famous sculptor. It was a figure of an angel made of white marble. A beautiful girl, very similar to Emily, sat on the pedestal and looked into the distance. This gift pleased the grieving Alex, and after the funeral, he often went to the grave and told his wife how his day was. It went on like that for 2 months. Then Charlie noticed that Alex had stopped visiting the deceased. It surprised the watchman, but then he accepted it. And then today, Alex showed up again. "Hello, my love," he said quietly and stroked the angel's hand. "I'm sorry I didn't show up for a long time. I had a lot of work to do. But I think about you every day. See, I brought your favorite orchids. All your flowers in the house are fine. Don't worry. The maid takes care of them. I had to hire an au pair. You know how it is. I can't do it without you. She's also a good cook. Not as good as you, of course, but it's good, so I eat well. Oh, if I knew how you were, and if there was anything there, I'd feel better." Alex Peterson looked around. The monument was covered in dust. The sculptures, installed almost a year ago, had wilted, and the grave mound itself was overgrown with grass. The fence needed painting.
And he needed a bench to sit on. Standing was a little hard for him.
"Good evening," came a cheerful voice from behind him. In front of Alex Peterson stood a young man about his age, wearing worn work clothes. He was just as tall, but more muscular, and ruddy cheeks from working outdoors. In short, a big guy. Unlike Alex, who, looking at the man, was a little jealous of his energy. "Yes, there is a lot of work here," Alex Peterson answered and looked at the gravedigger. "Don't look at me like that. I don't drink. Only on holidays, and then a little." The worker guessed what the client was thinking and quickly switched to informal communication. "My name is Timovi. You can just call me Timmy. I'm not judging." Alex Peterson somehow blushed, finally giving himself away. "The main thing for me is that the work was done well." "My name is Alex," the man said, and they shook hands. Timmy was surprised. What a weak handshake for a rich man, but he didn't show it. He must be sick. "Charlie said your wife was buried here," Timmy began, writing down in his notebook all the wishes for the work to be done. "What happened to her?" "She died young." "How old was she?" "Emily was 30, Alex answered and wiped the angel's face with a handkerchief. "She died in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. His truck swerved into oncoming traffic and hit her head on. She didn't stand a chance. When the police called me and invited me to the identification, I was in negotiations with business partners, which I had been chasing for a year. What happened after that? I don't remember very well. It's all a blur. I saw my wife in the coffin, a little blue stocking on her temple, and Emily was gone. And no other injuries on the body. This angel was made to look like her. Too bad, she was beautiful," Timmy said quietly, gazing at the sculpture. "I probably would have died of grief. How did you live through all this?" "I don't really live," Alex said quietly. He looked back and looked at his new acquaintance with interest, as if he had met his soulmate. Something inside whispered that Timmy was a man who wouldn't let him down. Those words touched Timmy to the very core of his heart. So much sorrow in Alex's eyes. "I won't charge you for the work," he said. "I'll help you for nothing." And then, catching his eyes, he added, "I know you're rich, but I won't take any money. I can't. Do you understand?" Alex nodded and turned away. He didn't want a stranger to see his tears. When Timmy realized what was going on, he pretended not to notice and started pulling weeds. "But I'm going," Alex said. "Here's my phone number. Call." Exchanging contacts. The men said goodbye. Returning back, Alex suddenly felt a surge of strength. It hadn't happened for a long time. For 10 months. So he decided to drop by the office. Colleagues, seeing the boss, smiled at him and waved their hands in greeting. It was obvious that he was a rare guest here. Alex managed the company remotely. He was assisted by his permanent assistant, Willie Stevenson. "What, Alex? You look better today, not so pale." The first thing he asked Alex, having entered his office. "Colleagues were happy to see you, said to go and ask how you were doing." "Yeah, and stuff." "Thank you, Willie Stevenson," Alex replied. "It's nice that you and the others care about me so much. Today I finally went to Emily's grave, hired a worker there. He's going to do everything, and I felt better, like Emily had given me strength. So I thought I'd stop by and do some work, help you out. It's hard enough without me around here. I see sales are down. That worries me." "Don't worry, we'll get through this," Willie Stevenson said. "It's not that bad. There's money. People want to work. There's no staff turnover. And that's the most important thing." "Well, why do you feel better?" "That's good. That employee you're talking about, can you trust him? He didn't take any money, and you're sure of him. You know what? Why don't I send my guys over? And they'll set up a hidden camera, and you can check in on him at any time to see how he's doing. It's embarrassing. He seems like a nice guy. I don't want to be insulted by mistrust. I like Timmy, a simple and hard-working man, and most importantly, there aren't many of them these days," Alex replied, embarrassed. "Trust but verify," Willie Stevenson said, raising his index finger. And Alex agreed to the proposal. His mood was elevated because the weakness and dizziness had receded, and he accepted the invitation of the staff to have lunch with them. To Alex's surprise, his appetite allowed him to eat half of a veal meat dish, something he couldn't afford before because of his health problems. Poor Alex was simply not retaining food. The doctors had fought to solve the problem, but other than baby food, he couldn't eat anything, now some meat. This was a real victory for him. Willie Stevenson was genuinely pleased. He wanted to think that all of Alex's bad things would be behind him, but he was wrong. In the evening, when Alex returned home, an hour later he had a headache, fever again, and his strength began to leave him, as if some unknown hand clutched his heart and did not let him breathe. He was ready to give everything for that evening with colleagues, where he was nice and cozy. There was laughter and jokes all around, and people's kind looks were fixed on him. Maybe this house is to blame, Alex thought to himself. What if it became my enemy after Emily left? No, she and I were happy here. We wanted to have children, but we didn't have time. We thought it wasn't time yet. "Alex Peterson, will you be having dinner, too?" Jessica asked thoughtfully when she came into the living room. "I have a meat dish with vegetables." "No, I don't want to. I had dinner with my coworkers, celebrating a victory. And now this dinner has something against me," Alex tried to joke, but he cringed at the pain in his stomach. "But your doctors have forbidden you to leave home for a long time," his assistant reassured him. "It's dangerous for your health. Don't go out for long periods of time. It affects your health." I don't know, Alex replied. "I was out of town today at the cemetery. Decided to check on Emily. I was very tired for such a long time, but after an hour it felt much better. Maybe it's her giving me strength?" "Yeah, that's crazy," Jessica argued, and I could hear the consternation in her voice. "The doctors strongly advised you to avoid long-distance travel, much less driving yourself."
What if you get sick on the way? What then? Well, then I'll be next to my wife and say hi to her, Alex replied and grinned. To be honest, I'm already tired of all this. No medication helps, can't leave the house. They won't put me in the hospital, since all my vitals are normal. Then what's wrong? Why am I so bad? It's been almost a year now.
Jessica remained silent. She quietly closed the door and went to water the flowers, the only legacy left from Alex's wife. The entire house was buried in greenery. On the second floor of the mansion in the very center, under a glass dome-shaped roof instead of a living room, was a flower greenhouse. What kind of flowers were there in it? Vines descended from the high ceiling. Seedlings were arranged in tiers like pyramid gardens. Family friends, knowing about Emily's passion, considered it their duty to bring back a cuttings of some flower from foreign trips. "You guess what I brought you back from India?" Willie Stevenson once said, holding a small fragile leaf behind his back. "Is it a parrot's beak?" marveled Emily. She was happy with such gifts, which she took in her hands like a fragile treasure and raised like her own children. Some of the flowers even had names. The pride of the mistress of the house was several dozen varieties of orchids. Here in the greenhouse every day Alex liked to visit, remembering the happy days spent with his beloved. That's why Jessica had a huge responsibility not to endanger any of the owner's flowers. When Alex was looking for a home assistant, the main criterion was the ability to take care of plants, including tropical ones, and cooking and everything else in second place. Jessica was that person. She cooked mediocrity, but she knew all kinds of roses and other exotic plants, the names of which can break the language. After a week of work, Jessica proved to be a knowledgeable and responsible person who could be trusted. With her arrival, the house seemed to glow with new colors. In addition, Alex was impressed with her ability to turn his wife's unattended garden back into a blooming paradise. "And let's put comfortable seats in the center of the greenhouse, so you can enjoy the aroma of flowers and plants, and relax after a hard day's work," Jessica suggested once. "That's a great idea, isn't it?" Alex rejoiced. Since then, the greenhouse became the favorite place of the owner of the house. The caring advice of his hands was transferred here. Photos of Emily, in which she was happy next to her husband. This corner of memories warmed Alex's soul. He never forgot his sweet Emily for a moment. One misfortune overshadowed Alex's joy, the gradual fading of strength and terrible pains in the stomach. "If anything, I'll be in the greenhouse," he said, and headed for his most favorite spot in the house. "Okay, I'll just water the flowers," the maid said, and brought a beautiful flower into the conservatory with bright red balls with ornate, fuzzy blue threads sticking out of them. "What is it called?" "I haven't seen it before," Alex asked. "It's an earth paradise," Jessica replied succinctly. "It likes to breathe by the open window in the fresh breeze. So periodically I take him out for a walk and put him on the windowsill. And you don't remember it because it has grown and become so beautiful. Your wife planted it when it was very small. Now I've put it back where it belongs with its fellows. Thank you, Jessica, for caring so reverently for these plants. It means a great deal to me," he thanked her. "It's no trouble to me," the maid replied. "Thank you so much for taking me on such a good job." The next day, Alex received a call from Willie Stevenson. "Alex, surveillance on your wife's grave has been set up. I'll send you the password now, and you can watch the landscaping work being done. You know, what I really wanted was to keep you from being bored at home. Here at least you can see everything with your own eyes and not worry about anything going wrong." "Yeah, that makes sense," Alex agreed. "My health is failing me today, so I'm staying home, but I'll be able to spy on someone I trust, all thanks to you." Never in his life had he ever had to spy on someone on camera. Gaining access for surveillance, Alex tapped into the broadcast. What he saw pleased him. Timmy was working with such enthusiasm, as if this job was some kind of exam for him. He cleanly pulled all the weeds, dug the beds, planted the flowers that had been delivered to him on Alex's orders, and the beds were painted white. The marble angel Timmy wiped down as carefully as if his life depended on it. "Shame on me for not trusting Timmy," Alex thought to himself. "I should give him a gift after all, since he won't take money." At that time, Timmy began to dust off the portrait on the pedestal of the monument. Alex was about to turn off the camera to put the finishing touches on his work. But then a strange incident caught his attention. As soon as the frame of the portrait moved slightly, a small bag fell out from under it. Timmy noticed it too and picked up the unusual find. It was a note, wrapped in a plastic envelope, apparently to keep rainwater or snow from getting on the paper. Timmy unfolded the note, began to read, then quickly looked around, picked up his tools, closed the wicket behind him, and left. "Hey, where are you going?" exclaimed Alex Peterson into the cell phone camera, as if Timmy could hear him. "What does it say? How is that even possible? Who texted my wife? Oh my God," putting her on the phone, but it kept ringing off the hook. And Alex couldn't get Timmy on the phone for a long time. His excitement was making it hard for him to breathe. His heart was pounding desperately and was ready to jump out of his chest. Alex had never regretted being sick so much. Otherwise, he would have run to find Timmy, who hadn't even bothered to call. Anger at the absent-minded assistant was eating him up from the inside. It was probably what gave him the strength to get downstairs, get in the car, and drive to the office. "Hello, Alex Peterson," greeted his secretary, and was surprised by the silence of the chief, who always said hello, found out how her grandson was doing in school, and now, with a stone face, passed by, as if a stranger. In fact, Alex was in a hurry, if his slow, limping gait could be called that. He was heading for someone who could solve the mystery of the note. "Hello, Tony," Alex said, stepping into the small room at the end of the hallway. "I need your help." Tony looked at the supervisor and nodded his head. Tony was a taciturn man in general, but a lot of people thought he was strange. When he'd come to apply for a job at Alex's company after graduation, the HR people had turned him down, thinking the kid didn't have much experience. It was only the head of the company who recognized the stubby, snub-nosed guy as a technology genius, ordering him to return Tony and give him a job as deputy head of the cybersecurity department. "Tony, can you read what the note says?" Alex asked, holding out a flash drive. He silently took it and worked his magic on it for a couple minutes. After another moment, he printed out a sheet of text. "The handwriting on the note is unsteady and choppy," Tony interrupted his silence. It was either written by a very upset woman or a child. Alex picked up the piece of paper with trembling hands, where the scribbles written in ballpoint pen were clearly too womaned. "Hello, you don't know me, but I know you. Where are you?" She promised me. "Take me, okay. My address is 34 Mayflower Street." Knocked twice. "What is this?" Alex asked himself. "I don't understand anything." "You know what there is to understand," Tony said. "We have to go to the address. Do you want me to go with you? You look a little pale." "I don't know what's going on. No need. There's a lot of work to do. You've done me a good favor." "Thank you. I'm glad I brought you into our company." Then Tony cracked a smile. "Come on." "Thank you." As the satisfied chief walked past the secretary, as if seeing her for the first time all day, he asked, "Good afternoon, Jessica. How's your grandson? Did he get in another fight at school?" "Good afternoon, Alex Peterson. I'm fine. Thank you." The secretary said hello for the second time. Alex smiled back and left, leaving the assistant puzzled. And by late afternoon, rumors were flying around the office that their beloved boss wasn't himself. Tony was the only one who knew what was wrong. Alex headed to the address given in the note. He couldn't wait to see the man who knew his wife so well. He also wanted to punch Timmy in the nose for hiding the note. When the car stopped near the small house on the corner of the street, Alex Peterson saw that a man was already knocking on the door twice, as the note said. Alex hurried as far as his strength allowed towards the mysterious house. The stranger turned around. It was Timmy. "Oh, you insolent bastard! How dare you not give me the note?" Alex exclaimed and grabbed him by the scruff of his shirt. Timmy easily freed himself from Alex's weak grip and, seeing that he was losing his balance, managed to support him. "You've got it all wrong, haven't you?" shouted the offended Timmy. "I found that note by accident. I didn't want to worry you. You're so sick. I just wanted to find whoever wrote it and bring him to you. Here, take this paper." And Timmy held out a piece of theater paper. Alex took it carefully, as if it were a cherished jewel. Both of them stood in silence and looked at the scribbles. "Why are you guys fighting?" They turned around and saw a frightened boy of about 9 years old with eyes huge with fear. He was unkemptly dressed, obviously neglected, looking like a vagrant. His cheeks were overgrown, his hands were dirty, and his shoes were begging for porridge. Yet the whole appearance of the boy was pleasing. He had a horsey, unformed figure, red-haired, covered with freckles, but with a kind face. He had grown out of his shabby pants long ago, which made his whole appearance seem even funnier, like a character from a Rowlash. "We came here because of this note," Alex said quietly. "And we're not fighting at all. We just haven't seen each other in a long time. So we're hugging," Timmy confirmed jokingly. "We wanted to see if it was a prank. There's something written in the note, but we can't tell you yet." And the men waited anxiously to see if the boy would fall for their trick. And the boy, taking everything at face value, answered, "I've stopped being afraid. You don't have to tell me. I know it was me who wrote it." That's it. Alex and Timmy looked at each other. "I wonder how that boy knows Emily." And as if he understood their mute question, he said, "Come on in, I'll tell you all about it." When they went inside, Alex noted to himself that either homeless people or drinkers lived here. The whole house had an old iron bed with dirty mattresses, pillow feathers sticking out in a single blanket. There were a couple of chairs lying on the floor. There were empty vodka bottles on the table, dirty dishes, and only half a loaf of black bread, a couple of slices of dried sausage, and a pickle. "Don't touch the sausage and cucumbers, or I'll be beaten again when my stepfather comes back and sees that there are no snacks," warned the little master, "if you want to eat. I have cookies and bread." "What's your name?" "I'm Uncle Alex. This is Uncle Timmy," said Alex. "And I know your name is Alex Peterson." "My name is Charlie," answered the boy. "I live here with my stepfather. I'm tired of living with my stepfather, who says it would be better if I died instead of my mom." Alex Peterson froze in surprise as if Bobby had said, "Sure, I'd love to." He hugged the boy, and he cried. Apparently the stress of losing his mother and then Aunt Emily, who had been a ray of hope for the boy, was making itself felt. "What's your stepfather going to say?" Timmy asked. "He'll probably be looking for you, won't he?"
"Where did you get this?" Veronica asked her daughter. She lost the power of speech for a moment, but when she tried to pull herself together, her tongue continued to disobey, and the woman's legs were shaking. She sat down on the couch, looking in horror at the gift Selena had given her. "Bought at the flea market," the girl replied, placing a vase of snow-white peonies on the table with her beloved mother's gift. The girl turned around and saw that her mother had opened the box and looked at its contents with an incomprehensible look. "And what happened? What's inside, Mom?" Sitting down next to her mother, she began to look at the gift. The day before, Selena had not had time to look at it properly. The wooden casket was quite old, and all of its surfaces were carved. It looked like it had once been decorated with stones, but now there were only empty hollows. "Why are you so scared?" Mom asked Celine. "I thought you would like my gift. You love all sorts of vintage things." "Daughter, look what's inside," Veronica said in a stony voice. The girl took the box from her mother's hands and looked inside. There were pictures. Taking a closer look, Selena looked at her mother incomprehensibly. They were pictures of her father, who had died in a car accident 10 years ago. But the most amazing thing was that the girl had never seen such pictures before. They were fresh photos, taken recently. How can this be, if her father has been resting in the grave for 10 years? "So Dad is alive?" she asked her mother. "I don't understand anything either," replied Veronica, "but one thing is clear. The photos were taken after his death, however unbelievable it may sound. But I was at the funeral with you. I saw how the coffin with your father's body was lowered into the grave. How you cried. Throwing a clod of earth into the grave. How could he have gotten out of there and come back to life?" "We have to figure it all out," Mom said. "And who did you buy it from?" Selena told her mother how she walked from the institute the usual way through the bazaar, where the inhabitants were selling various junk. She was immersed in her thoughts, as it was the last academic year of the university. The institute was noisy. Students gathered in clusters in the corridors, sharing news and plans. Selena stood at the window with her friend Catherine and her boyfriend Ivan. She hadn't seen the young man all summer. He was away on a job. Selena and Evan had been friends since high school. As a boy, Evan fell in love with Selena and even enrolled in the same institute with her to always be close to her. Last year, he offered her to live together. Inherited from his grandmother, the guy got a small studio apartment. Housing could not be called very comfortable and prestigious, but the apartment was near the institute, and Selena's family lived on the outskirts, from which it took more than an hour to get there. But recently, they began to have frequent conflicts and misunderstandings. Evan became friends with guys and girls from the oil faculty. Most of them were from rich families, very well dressed, always had money. In an effort to fit in with his friends, Evan started working more than studying. Selena had to do his notes for him to solve problems. She reassured herself. Even works so that we have something to live on. He does it all for our happiness and well-being. Selena herself took freelance orders, working online on an old laptop she bought off the shelf. Listen, when I left, you were wearing that sweater. The guy said to Selena, I came back. You're wearing it again. You couldn't buy yourself some new clothes over the summer. Selena tried to justify herself. She didn't like Evan saying such things in front of her friend. You worked. Take more orders. The guy insisted on his rightness. You know that Selena didn't know what to say. The guy's words hurt her in her heart. Was it her fault that her family was in such distress? Was it her fault? Come on, change something in yourself, or I'm beginning to think that soon you'll go back to your mother in your hovel. Don't embarrass me in front of my friends. They make fun of me almost every day. I'm ashamed to even bring you into my company, and all the boys come there in pairs. Selena looked at Ivan with bitter resentment. The guy she'd known since childhood had changed a lot over the summer. The change in him was not for the better. She realized more and more clearly that she didn't want to be around the man who said such hurtful words to her, who didn't want to understand the plight of her family and what she was trying to earn as best she could. Seeing how offended Selena, Catherine decided to interrupt this unpleasant conversation. Let's go and look at the schedule of lectures, she suggested to her friend. Probably already posted on the first floor in the hall. Let's go and look at the lecture schedule, she suggested to her friend. It's probably already posted on the first floor in the hall. Catherine took Selena by the hand, dragged her towards the stairs. On the way, she said, Well, your Evan's got a nerve. Such words to say such words. How can he only turn his tongue? He's from a simple family, and now he's playing the big boys. Selena didn't want to have this conversation. She didn't like it at all. She walked like a robot, not thinking about anything. Having rewritten the schedule into notebooks, the girls left the building of the institute. The weather outside was beautiful. It was called Golden Autumn. In the park, the yellow-red leaves of maples rustled under their feet. The air had that transparency that only happens in September. Do you need a ride? Catherine asked her friend. She knew that Selena would take more than an hour to get home. From the expression on the girl's face, Catherine understood. Today in Vanya's apartment, she will not go. No, I'll take the bus, then walk. Selena refused. The weather is great. No rain. I want to walk, think. Well then, see you tomorrow. Catherine kissed Selena on the cheek and went to the parking lot, where her new car was parked. Her friend had recently passed her driver's license, and her parents had bought her a car as a present. Catherine had offered Selena a ride, a trip to the countryside, to the river, but she had always refused. She was always busy. Selena walked down the street, unnoticeably approached a small bazaar where people were selling things, furniture, various household items. They were doing it for different reasons. Some people didn't need these things anymore, and others brought them to the flea market to get some money to live on. That's how almost all the things from their house ended up here. Mom sold something every day to feed her son and daughter. Dad died when the children were young. Selena had just started school in Harvey. You didn't know, and now you know, one of the strangers said angrily. So you have to pay it back, or do you want your children to disappear one day? He looked meaningfully at Harvey, who was playing cards on the floor, and at Selena, who had come out of the kitchen at the noise. Leave now, Mom said. I barely had enough money to bury my husband and I had to borrow. I have no money to pay my debts, especially since I didn't take anything from you personally. It doesn't matter. The man approached Veronica, took her by the throat, breathing nastily in her face. You'll pay it back like a sweetheart, otherwise we'll burn down your apartment. The frightened woman closed the door behind the strangers, sat down on the sofa, wrapping her arms around her head. She didn't know what to do. Lately, her husband had been missing all the time. Later, she learned that he plays cards in the casino. For these purposes, takes loans and borrows in dubious offices. What are you doing? Veronica said to her husband, you're going to get us into the world. But Selena's father continued to play, again and again borrowed money, and then he died. The accident happened on a country highway. After examining the scene, the investigator told Veronica, according to preliminary data, your husband failed to control himself on the slippery road from the rain, flew into the oncoming traffic lane. His car overturned several times and plummeted off the bridge into the river. The car was pulled out, but the man's body was not found. Most likely, he was swept away by the current. They searched for 2 months, but all was in vain. There was a sewage treatment plant downriver. If Veronica's husband's body had gotten there, it was impossible to find him. First, he was reported missing, and then they determined a different status, issuing documents that Selena's father had died. The first thing the girl's mother did when their apartment was left by the collectors, called the parking lot and asked if she could take her husband's car, which was there until the end of the investigation. She was allowed to do so. The mother sold the car for a small amount of money. When strange men came to their apartment again, she handed them a wad of bills. One of the strangers counted it and spoke through his teeth. It's good that you tried to find money, but here is only the smallest part. Collect more, we'll be back soon. And don't you dare leave the city, we will still find you. The frightened woman put an ad in the newspaper to sell their country house. The cottage was in a great location and was expensive. Married, they built it together. The 2-story structure on a plot of 15 acres was the family's vacation spot. Here they went for the summer, so that the children could eat fresh vegetables and berries from the beds, which were carefully tended by Veronica. After selling the dacha, she again gave the money to the collectors, and a month later the woman sold a 4-room apartment in the center, bought a small apartment in an old house on the outskirts. Only this money was not enough, so from the house were sold almost all things, including services, chandeliers, furniture, even was sold some clothes. But collectors again and again demanded money. Veronica's husband owed a fabulous amount. Sometimes the woman cried, you lie there in the grave and do not puff, and we went to the world, completely without anything left. Soon we will have nothing to feed our children, she bitterly and resentfully addressed her husband who had passed away. Having found out that her husband was playing cards and borrowing money, she tried to stop him many times. Stop going to the casino, it will not end well. But her husband did not listen to her. In the end, Veronica gave up on him. Her children were more important to her. Harvey was just born, needed care and nutrition, and Selena went to school. Every evening with her had to study, do homework. Selena's sad thoughts were interrupted by a squeaky female voice. Girl, buy a jewelry box. The girl looked at the elderly woman who was holding out a handmade wooden item to her. Why do I need it? Selena asked. You give it to the dearest person, and he will thank you for it. Selena didn't know what the old woman was talking about, but she remembered that today was her mother's anniversary. They were not going to celebrate. The family had no extra money for birthday celebrations. But the girl's mom loved antique things, so Selena looked closely at the box. The elderly woman held the girl's hand. Her touch was unpleasant, chilled her heart, and goosebumps ran along her skin. Celine wanted to get rid of the grandmother as soon as possible. She sensed something scary in the old woman's eyes, something disturbing, inexplicable. She tried to pull her hand out, but the woman held it tightly. This box will reveal a secret to you. What's she talking about? She's crazy, Selena thought. But the girl remembered how her mother had once stood on this spot and asked passersby to buy things from her. Maybe the grandmother has nothing to eat, so she carries things to the bazaar from home to get some money for food. Only this thought made Selena agree to buy the box. All right, She said to the old woman, "But I don't have much money, and you must be asking a lot." "I'll take as much as you give me," she replied. The girl took out a purse from her purse, took out a few bills, and gave them to the grandmother. The woman gave her the box in return. "I didn't buy a present for my mom. I'll at least give her this box," Selena thought. On the way, she bought a bouquet of white peonies. Her mother loved these flowers that filled everything around her with their sweet fragrance. Listening to her daughter's story about the strange old woman, Veronica didn't understand what was going on. "Are you sure you've never seen this woman before?" she asked her daughter. "I'm sure I would have remembered her. She has a very expressive appearance," Selena convinced her mother. "She was a Baba Yaga, very unpleasant. I had a frost on my skin from her touch." "Mystical," her mother said thoughtfully. She took the pictures from the box again and looked at them. "I can't believe he's alive," Selena said. "Maybe it's a prank. Someone decided to get on our nerves by bringing us back to the past." "It's not about the past. Look." Her mom handed her one of the pictures. "This house wasn't there when her father died. It was a vacant lot. You should remember it. We used to pass through it sometimes when we wanted to take a shortcut from school to home." Selena looked closer. Indeed, this house had not been here before, but her father was photographed in front of it. The man was well dressed, smiling at the photographer in the camera lens. "How so?" The girl did not understand. "He is alive and does not let his family know about it." "Who did they bury in a grave in the cemetery then?" Veronica and Selena sat pensively on the couch. Each was thinking about something different. The past often returns to people's lives, makes them remember old, already lost ties, makes adjustments to the present, but to resurrect the dead? That doesn't happen. However, they never saw their father dead. A coffin with his favorite things was lowered into the grave. They just had to pay tribute to the man, so that's what they did. This method of burial was insisted on by the father's mother, Selena's grandmother. "Her son died. He is no longer alive, and I won't even have a place to go to the grave," she lamented, persuading Veronica to bury at least a coffin with his things. Suddenly, Harvey entered the room. "Why are you sitting there like water in your mouth?" he asked jokingly. His mother handed the boy a box of photographs. "What's this?" Harvey looked at the pictures. "That's my father." "And where did you get such pictures? I've never seen them before." "We haven't seen them either, son," said Veronica. "Selena had bought this box today at the flea market to give to me, and in it were fresh pictures of your father." "He's dead," the boy wondered. "Apparently not," Selena said. "Very much alive and looking good." "You guys look like crazy people right now." Selena's brother twisted his finger at his temple. He left the room, thinking that women were strange creatures and it was impossible to understand the logic of their thinking. Trying to distract herself from the strange thoughts, Veronica asked her daughter, "How are things at the Institute?" "Everything is fine, Mommy," the girl replied. Outside, the window began to darken, but she was not going to leave. It seemed strange to Veronica. Her daughter had been living with her childhood friend Ivan for a year. They sort of had a love affair, although Selena's mom had never liked the guy. She was always haunted by the feeling that at the first chance he would betray her daughter, hurt her. After what her husband had done, Veronica no longer believed in the decency of men, considered them all scoundrels. Nor did she believe Evan when he told her that he wanted to be together with Selena, to build a family together. "I don't want to pressure you," Veronica told her daughter, "but Evan is slippery, unreliable. So he seems to love me." Selena tried to argue uncertainly with her mother. "Time will tell whether he loves you or not," the woman said wisely. She drew on her own experience. She had once thought her husband loved her too. But after what he had done to them, after his family had fallen into debt, she had not tried to look for good qualities in men. That's why she never married again. And when did she have time to look for suitors? All her worries were only about how to feed her children and what to dress them in. After her husband died, Veronica had to take 3 jobs. Collectors constantly came to their miserable apartment, bought to replace a large 4-room apartment, demanding money. Fearing for her life and the lives of her children, Veronica saved on everything to put money aside to pay off her husband's debts. But no matter how much she paid, the interest accrued again and again. The amount of the debt almost never decreased. "I'll stay with you tonight," Selena said. I have a lot of things to think about in peace. Of course, my daughter. Her mother hugged her. This is your home too. Is something wrong? In Veronica's eyes, there was concern for her daughter. She was proud of her. The girl studied and worked part-time, not a penny from her mother. But now she was worried about something. With Vanya Coral shared with her mother Selena, he has recently become some kind of alien or something. I do not want to moralize, said her mother, but I assume that long together you will not be. You're a kind girl though, and when your Evan comes to apologize, you'll melt. You'll go back to him. I'm not so sure about that, Selena said, putting the pictures of her father back in the box. Why waste time with a man who doesn't appreciate you? Veronica thought she had raised not only a beautiful and kind daughter, but also a great smart girl. Selena, indeed, was judicious, always thinking over every step. The girl put the box on the Trumo, thought that it was necessary to sort it all out properly. She went to the pantry, took out a cot from there, made herself a sleeping place in the small kitchen. It's so nice to be in my own home with my loved ones, she thought as she drifted off to sleep. Selena's room had long been occupied by Harvey, and her mother slept on the couch in the hall, so there was no other place to spread out but the kitchen. At night, Selena dreamed of a strange old woman from the flea market. She grabbed her by the arm, laughed loudly, and said, "You'll learn the secret of your father. It will be easier on the soul and life will get better." The girl was awakened by the ringing of the cell phone. It was Evan. Without even saying hello, he shouted into the receiver, "Where are you? Why didn't you come home? I woke up in the night and you weren't there. I was at my mom's, and this is your house, not mine." Selena replied in a sleepy voice. She thought that Evan found her absence in the night, but didn't even try to find out where his girlfriend was. What if something happened to her? What if she was in trouble? He slept peacefully through the morning, and now he's calling trying to make her look guilty. Selena sat up on the cot. "Come on, don't be stupid. Come back," the guy said insistently. "I realize I said some unpleasant things to you, but am I wrong? You've really turned into a gray moth. Shall I come get you?" "No, you don't have to come," Selena said, "and don't call again." "Fuck you." She heard the voice of an angry Vanya. The girl realized that this is not a time out to make an important decision, to take a break in the relationship. This is a breakup. She doesn't want to be around Ivan anymore, doesn't want to listen to his insults, doesn't want to be a gray moth. She was more preoccupied with other thoughts right now. Selena wanted to understand if her father was really alive. However, she almost didn't doubt it anymore. She threw on a robe, opened her laptop, and tiptoed into the hall where her mother was sleeping on the couch. Selena picked up the box of photos. She wanted to scan them and find proof on the internet that her father was alive. The scans produced 0 results, and Selena ran the scanner over and over again. Suddenly, one of the pictures was identified on a social networking site. It was the page of a woman she didn't know. Not a very young person, about 40 years old, was posting pictures with Selena's father. The girl scrutinized the strange woman's face. She had definitely never met her before, or she would definitely remember her. Who was she? Why was posting pictures of her dad? Where did she even take a picture of him? Veronica entered the kitchen. "Already awake, daughter? Good morning." The woman put the kettle on the stove, lit the gas, collect the cot, and I'll make breakfast. "Harvey has second period today. When are you going to the institute?" "I have to be home by second period, Mom," Selena answered, folding the bedding neatly and putting the cot in the closet. There was no hurry. She could eat breakfast in peace, especially since she had already missed her mother's cheesecakes with sour cream. Veronica set the table and poured tea into cups. Harvey, who had fallen asleep, rubbed his eyes and sat down on a stool, reaching for a plate of cheesecakes. "Go wash up first," his mother said. Later, waved the boy away. Veronica looked at him sternly, and the son had no choice but to wander into the bathroom. "How did you sleep, Selena?" Mom asked the girl. "Not very well," she answered. "She dreamt about that woman from the market all night. What a creepy old woman she is. In my dreams, she kept telling me about some secret." Selena told her mother that she found a page of a strange woman in social networks, that she put there photos of her father. The girl turned the laptop so that her mom could look at the screen. The woman gazed at the different pictures, flipping through the page. "I've never seen this woman," she said thoughtfully. "I certainly don't know her, and I've never seen my father before." "Who is that?" "And I don't know, Mom," answered her daughter, "but I'm determined to find out. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep well." "And maybe you shouldn't. Try to persuade Selena, Mother. For us, he's dead. And if it's not so, then why did he not show up?" "Maybe he was threatened because of his debts. He was afraid of being killed." Veronica felt her resentment and anger at her husband boiling up in her. "He was alive, but he made me a widow and put me in debt. You remember how hard it was for us then, how we were deprived of a good home, a country house, how for days we ate rye bread and chowder, which had not a gram of fat, because there was nothing to buy meat with." Veronica broke apart. Sad memories came over her. Every time the bell rang in the apartment, she flinched, afraid that they would be killed or that her children would be taken away from her. Often the debt collectors came when Mom was at work. They would ring the doorbell, and Selena would grab little Harvey, hold him with one hand, and with the other she would clamp her mouth shut so he wouldn't scream, so that the strange men would think no one was home. For several years, while the mother paid off her late husband's debts, the children did not know what candy was. She had nothing to buy clothes for her son and daughter. At night, the woman sewed on an old sewing machine, restitching some clothes to dress the children. Selena did not know what beautiful dresses and heeled shoes were, and Harvey was constantly teased by the boys in the yard. The children hardly ever saw their mother. Coming from one job, she again ran away to another, making sure only that her son and daughter were at home, that they were not stolen, not kidnapped. The woman was always tired, exhausted. She did not mourn her husband, did not think about their past life together. All Veronica's thoughts were occupied with how to pay off debts. What else to do so that the collectors got rid of her, stopped threatening? To help her mother, Selena began to clean the entrances in the neighboring apartment building. 4 entrances in a 9-story building was not easy for her. In addition, cleaning took a lot of time, and the girl still had to do her homework, pick up her younger brother from kindergarten, something to feed. The penny she received for cleaning the entrances, the girl gave to her mother, and the latter bought simple products. Earlier, when they had a country house, they often brought potatoes and other vegetables from there. Now there was not even this help. The formerly prosperous family quickly turned into a beggar family. Selena didn't even go to the graduation party because she had nothing to wear. "Don't make excuses for him," Veronica said. "I warned him that playing cards wouldn't do any good, but he didn't listen to me. He always did everything his own way and didn't want to consider us. He lived for his own pleasure. I had the misfortune to marry that coward and scoundrel." "Calm down," Mom tried to interrupt Veronica Selena, but the flow of her mother's bitterness, resentment, and anger seemed to be inexhaustible. The words were pouring out of her heart, filled with worry for the children who had to endure such deprivation, fear, half-starved life. However, no matter how bad it was, Veronica always tried only for her son and daughter. She denied herself everything. Sometimes she went to bed hungry, dividing her dinner between Selena and Kolka. Several years of fear for her children, hunger, poverty. Veronica was able to get out of all this only by paying off the debt to the debt collectors. But even now, when their family is not threatened, they live very poorly. Simple furniture, an unrenovated apartment, inexpensive clothes, only the bare necessities. It was good that Selena managed to enter the institute on a budget. If she had failed the entrance exams, her mother would have had nothing to pay for her daughter's studies on a commercial basis. The girl hugged her mother. She was afraid her blood pressure would skyrocket and tried to calm her down. "I'll try to figure it all out," Selena said confidently. "I'll try to find out who the old woman was who gave you that damn box with your father's pictures in it." Selena jabbed at her laptop again. "We need to geolocate, find out where the pictures were taken," she thought. The girl was looking at a photo in the gallery on the page of a strange woman. Here she was standing next to a large, luxurious 2-story cottage. It was obvious that the woman was not poor. She was wearing fashionable clothes, beautifully styled hair with the effect of lamination. In the background was visible plot of land with a pool and a gazebo, buried in rose bushes. It turns out that her father accumulated debts, realized that her mother would not help him, faked his death and went to live with a rich woman. Selena's head began to form a logical chain that seemed unbelievable in its meanness. It turns out so, agreed her mother, finishing the dishes after breakfast. Suddenly, Selena's laptop gave out a geolocation. It turned out that the house the beautiful woman had been photographed next to was 3 hours away from their town by train. I'll have to go there. It's the only way I can find out something about my father. Find him and look him in the eye, Selena thought. She wrote down the address on a piece of paper, closed her laptop, and started to get ready for the institute. Leaving the house, she walked the same way, hoping to meet the old woman at the flea market. But the Baka, who looked like Baba Yaga, was nowhere to be found. Between lectures, Selena told about everything that happened yesterday to her friend Ekaterina. She listened without interrupting, and then said, "You do not worry. I myself was shocked yesterday from the way Evan treats you. I thought you were in love, but in reality, he's just using you and humiliating you. Sure, he likes it when he comes home to a hot dinner and at night, he gets his share of female affection. But a real man should not only receive, but also give. Your Ivan is not one of those real men." As for the story with the box, Catherine did not know how to support her friend. Told by her, really was incredible, seemed unreal. "I thought such stories only in the sick brain directors of various melodramas are born," smiled sadly Catherine. "But apparently, and in life happens something that cannot be explained. We must try to find out all the facts." Began to share his plan. Selena once again thanked her friend for her participation. The girls kissed on the cheek and parted. Right from the institute, Selena went to the train station. She bought a ticket and went to the platform. The girl was worried. She couldn't stop thinking about what she would say to the strange woman from the rich house. Selena tried to mentally talk through everything that had accumulated, built a dialogue with the stranger, assumed her answers to the questions that worried Selena. Immersed in her thoughts, she'd almost passed the desired station. Stepping onto the platform, the girl looked around. Apparently, it was a cottage village, because the settlement did not look like a village or a hamlet. She approached a man with a suitcase and asked for directions to the street, the name of which was written on a piece of paper. "Sorry, girl." The man shook his head. "I'm not from around here. I was visiting, so I can't help you." Selena walked away from the station building towards the houses on the first street she could find. Suddenly, she remembered that in her smartphone, she could download a map of the village and find the desired address. The girl sat down on a bench next to a store and started looking for the coordinates in her phone. It turned out that the house she needed was at the other end of the village. Selena walked down the street again. Despite the map she was looking at on her smartphone, she was still lost. There was no way she could figure out where she was. When she saw a woman with a stroller walking towards her, she decided to ask for help. "Hello, can you tell me how to get to this address?" She addressed the young mother. The woman stopped, still rocking the stroller, looked at the leaf. "It is very close," she said, showing the direction with her hand. "Go straight, then turn right and to the end of the street." "Thank you," Selena thanked her. After a while, she found herself at the right house. The girl recognized it. It was exactly the same as in the picture. The entrance to the plot was blocked by a high, massive gate with forged elements, and next to it was a wicket. The girl rang the bell. A beautiful woman came out of the house. From the expression on her face, Selena realized that the stranger was not very happy to see the guest. "Who are you and what do you want?" The woman began to say, "If you are going to sell me a vacuum cleaner or a toaster, go straight away. Go from day to day, no peace. Normal people do not buy anything from such passable, is not it clear? There are stores and marketplaces for shopping, and you're all wandering around the house, disturbing them with your visits." "I'm sorry," Selena interrupted her. "I'm not selling anything. Don't swear, please, and I'm sorry again for bothering you." She pulled out the photo she had taken from the wooden box, handing the woman one of the pictures. "I need to know what your connection is to this man." The girl spoke up. The woman took the photograph in her hands, looked at the image carefully. It was clear from her face that she knew him. "And why should I tell you anything?" she asked. "Who are you anyway?" "The thing is, the picture is of my father. He died tragically 10 years ago." "Dead, you say?" The woman was surprised. "But I think he's alive and doing very well." "So you know him?" Selena asked. The woman opened the gate wide and gestured for the girl to come in. "Let's go into the house." Selena followed the stranger, her heart racing. A few more minutes and she would know everything about her father. Maybe then she could understand why he had acted so shamelessly to this family, why he had made her mother suffer, abandoned her son and daughter. The woman led Selena into the house. They entered the large kitchen. What a setting, Selena thought to herself. Looking at the luxurious kitchen set, the bar counter with high chairs, outlandish appliances. "You sit down wherever you feel comfortable," the woman said, "and I'll make some coffee. Do you want coffee or tea?" "Coffee is fine," Selena replied modestly. "My name is Emma," said the woman, pouring the beans into the tank of the coffee machine. "I'm Selena. In the picture is my father. His name was Victor." "I've heard that before. You don't have to repeat it." The girl was silent, waiting for Emma to say something about her father. But the woman silently took out cups from the cupboard, preparing a flavorful drink. "When did you say your father died?" She finally spoke. 10 years ago, he was in a car accident. We buried him in a closed coffin, putting there only things. They never found the body." "Where did you get those pictures?" Emma asked. "The pictures came to me by accident. I bought the box at the market from an old woman, not because I liked it, but because she begged me to. And I thought maybe she didn't have enough money for food," Selena told me. She was silent for a while, then said in a quiet voice, "When my father died, my mother also stood at the flea market and sold things, because my brother and I had nothing to feed. I met Victor also about 10 years ago." Selena began her story. "He seemed very lonely to me. I had just divorced my husband. I needed companionship. I wanted to distract myself from the memories of separation. And then Victor came along. He seemed calm and balanced, not like my ex-husband, who regularly beat me. Because of his beatings, I can't have children now." "That's terrible," Selena said. The girl herself thought that it was true. Her father was alive, and he knew Emma. That was the key to the mystery Selena wanted to solve. "We started dating Victor," Emma continued, "and with him I forgot about the divorce and my abuser husband. Victor never laid a hand on me. We lived in my apartment downtown. I have a large apartment, combined from two on the same stairwell. But Victor kept insisting that we buy a country house, somewhere away from the city. It seemed noisy and dirty to him, you see. Of course, he wanted to go far away so he wouldn't accidentally run into our mom or his kids somewhere," Selena thought. "And you bought this house?" she asked Emma. "Yes, my father is not the last man in our region. He holds a very good position. I borrowed money from him." "Notice," she said, "a very large sum of money. That's when we bought this house, started living here. My apartment in the city was still empty. I did not want to sell it, and it is very expensive. It is not easy to find a buyer in a provincial city. You drink coffee. Do not be shy. Take sandwiches, probably hungry from the road." The woman moved the cup of coffee and a plate of sandwiches closer to Selena. The girl felt hungry. She hadn't eaten anything since this morning. "Thank you so much," she thanked Emma. "I really am starving." Chewing on a bun with cheese and sausage, she asked, "Did my father ever tell you that he had a family?" "He never said a word. I also thought it was strange that he didn't care that I couldn't have children. My ex beat me up so badly I had to have surgery, which left me infertile. But nothing. He still longed to sit in jail. My father tried, attracted all the connections, that this bastard for a long time closed." Selena realized that Emma is immersed in his own memories and leaves the topic of conversation, which was so important for the girl. "Where is Victor? I mean my father now?" she asked Emma. "He went to the neighboring village on business," the woman answered. "Do you want more coffee?" Selena nodded, moving the empty cup towards Emma. "I'm sorry, I can't offer you anything but sandwiches. Cooking isn't really my thing. Victor usually does that." Selena thought the woman was talking about some other man, not her father. Dad never stood at the stove. In fact, he didn't even make his own sandwiches or fry his own eggs. That was all Mommy's job. She suddenly decided that it was not worth beating around the bush. Emma had treated her well, so it was time to tell it like it was. "You see," Selena began her story, "we were a close-knit, well-to-do family. My little brother and I didn't need anything. But after Kolia was born, my father was replaced. I began to hear often that he raises his voice at my mother, and he was always disappearing somewhere. could come in the morning, was nervous, constantly angry. I only later learned that my father started playing cards and this hobby turned into an addiction. It's also called gambling addiction. Yes, it can happen, Emma nodded. She sat down across from Selena, palm resting on her chin, ready to listen. One day, the police called my mom and told her that my dad had been killed in a car accident. More precisely, they said that his car had overturned and fallen off the bridge into the river. The investigation team and divers worked there, but they didn't find my father's body. They thought he was carried away by the current. That's how we buried him. He was actually alive, I take it? Emma asked. Yes, I'm sure of it now, Celine said. She liked Emma more and more. She wanted to tell everything to this woman she had seen for the first time. After the funeral, strange men showed up at our apartment. They were debt collectors who had come to collect my father's debts. Mom explained to them that he was not alive, but the men said that now she owed them for her husband, and if she didn't give them the money, our bodies would be found somewhere in the forest or in the river. Mom was very afraid for herself and even more afraid for Harvey and me. She sold our house outside the city, sold the apartment, collected money from acquaintances, sold things, furniture, dishes. But the amount collected wasn't enough. Collectors threatened every time. My mom started working 3 jobs, but we were still starving. Harvey was sometimes not taken to kindergarten because he had no clothes or shoes. My mom was very tired. The 3 jobs and constant hunger severely damaged her health. Did she die? Emma asked. No? Thank God. But now she's often sick. Her legs don't walk well. Her blood pressure is skyrocketing. But don't think, she doesn't complain. She did everything to keep us from starving to death and to get the debt collectors off our backs. God, that's terrible, Emma said. I'm so sorry for you and your mom. So much to go through. We're not very well off now, but we have enough to live on. My mom still works. I work part-time, and Harvey is in school. The only thing I don't understand is why my dad didn't let me know he was alive. If he was afraid for his life, that he'd be found and killed for his debts. Why did he worry about us? He faked his own death and ran away, jeopardizing the lives of the people closest to him and children who were certainly not to blame for what happened to him. Emma pressed her lips together. It was obvious that she didn't know the answers to the questions that bothered the pretty girl sitting across from her. The woman looked out the window. There's Victor, she said. A large black car pulled up to the house. The gate swung open automatically, and the car drove into the yard. A man got out. Selena recognized him as her father. He hadn't changed much in 10 years. He looked very good. Victor, we have company, Emma shouted. She probably wanted to warn Selena's father that she wasn't alone. Yes, there was a man's voice. Who's visiting? Selena's dad walked into the kitchen. She stared at him, unable to say a word. Is that you? Dad said. He went to the sideboard, took out a glass and a bottle of whiskey and poured some. Why am I not surprised? Maybe because you were always waiting and afraid that your secret would be revealed. Suddenly, Selena answered sharply. Why did you come here? Why did you find me? Asked her father. To look into your eyes, to ask why you did this to Mom and to us. Selena felt anger boiling inside her. In her father's eyes, she saw no sense of remorse, no regret, no pity. There was only fear in them. The man had lived all these years afraid of being found, of being forced to pay back the money he had borrowed. Here, look. Taking a sip from the glass, Victor turned to his daughter. At that moment, she was amazed at how insolent his look was. She looked. Now get out and don't dare to tell anyone about me. The father loomed menacingly over the girl. She looked up at him, tears welling up in her eyes. Selena had hoped to the last minute that her father's forced act had been weighing on him for the past 10 years, that he was worried about his family, that his heart was bleeding. But this man seemed to have the coldest heart of all. When you died, Selena was silent for a moment, then continued in a quiet voice, afraid to cry. The debt collectors came to our house. They were beating the money out of Mom. Mom sold everything to pay back what you borrowed from different credit companies. We had nothing to eat, nothing to wear. Mom worked 3 jobs. We were starving. Do you realize that? Your children and the woman you love were starving, exhausted by hard labor. Mom did everything she could to keep us alive and pay off your debts. It cost her her health and us several years of humiliation. I was called a beggar at school because I wore overstitched clothes that were always darned. Did you feel sorry for us? Did you regret anything?" The girl's eyes were filled with a pain that was hard to bear. Victor straightened up, again splashed whiskey into the glass. "I haven't loved your mother for a long time," he said, "but I didn't know my debts would be kicked out of her." Suddenly, he turned to face Selena. It was twisted with a grimace of anger. "I didn't know," he shouted. "Do you realize that? Now get out and don't ever let me see you again." "Get out," I said. Selena slowly stood up and walked towards the exit. In the doorway, she stopped, turned around and said quietly, "I feel sorry for you. You have no one in this life." Emma remained silent the whole time, watching the drama playing out in her house. When Selena went to the front door, she caught up with her and walked her to the gate. In parting, the woman said, "Selena, please leave me your phone number." The girl took out of her purse a notebook in which she usually wrote down the schedule of lectures at the institute, wrote the phone number and gave it to Emma. She quickly walked away, no longer holding back her tears. How much time passed until the girl reached the train station, she did not know. Selena got lost again in the unfamiliar village, wandered through the streets, and when she got to the platform, the railroad platform was empty and night had fallen on the village. The station building was closed. Seeing the schedule on the door, Selena realized that there would be no more trains today and she would have to wait until morning. The autumn wind blew strongly. The weather, which had been so pleasant during the day, turned bad. The girl shivered, wrapped herself in a thin windbreaker. She wanted to sleep. Selena sat down on a bench, began to peck her nose, her eyes closed by themselves. Her body's defenses were working, forcing her to fall into a deep sleep to survive the extreme stress she had experienced today. Selena lay down on the bench, put her purse next to her, and fell into a deep sleep. Emma's face appeared in her visions, then her father's angry grimace. She woke up to someone snatching her purse from her hands. When she opened her eyes, she saw a boy running down the platform, holding her bag in his hands. That was the last straw, Selena sobbed, unable to hold back her tears. She sobbed like a child who had been badly hurt. The girl didn't understand why all this was happening to her, why she had come here at all, why she was looking for her father. What did she expect? That he would rush to hug and kiss her? That he'd apologize on his knees? No, that didn't happen. It wasn't his style. His father was a selfish man who cared only about his own well-being and didn't care about his family at all. Dawn was barely breaking in the sky. It was still a long way off until morning. Selena approached the station building, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her windbreaker. The first train was at 10 o'clock. She glanced at her watch. It showed 4 in the morning. Sitting at the station was pointless. The money for the ticket was left in the purse the boy had stolen. After thinking for a while, Selena took her cell phone out of her pocket and dialed Catherine's number. She picked up the phone surprisingly quickly. "Catherine, sorry to wake you up." Selena began to speak. "What happened? Why are you calling so early? Where are you?" "Worried friend. I'm in the village that the navigator pointed me to at the train station." Selena's voice suddenly snapped and she sobbed again. Selena calmed down. "Tell everything in order." Catherine was very worried about her friend. She was waiting for her to call in the evening and tell the news about her father, but there was no call. "My bag was stolen, and there is money for the return ticket." Calming down, complained the girl. "So everything will be fine," assured her friend. "Send me the coordinates. I'm on my way to you." "But you don't go anywhere, you hear? Don't go anywhere." "Okay," Selena replied. "I'll be waiting here on the bench on the platform. I'm on my way. Hang in there. I'll try to be quick," said her friend and disconnected. The girl leaned back on the bench. Everything that had happened to her yesterday seemed like a nightmare, a terrible dream. She waited for Katerina, occasionally glancing at her watch. 3 hours later, a red car appeared in the parking lot near the railway station. Selena's friend ran out of it. She hugged her, stroking her hair, saying, "It's all right now, don't worry." Whether from the stress she had experienced or from the cold, Selena was shivering. Noticing this, Catherine quickly led her friend to the car. "Sit down," she said, and herself pulled out of the trunk plush plate, covered Selena well that I took a thermos with hot tea, though while rumbling in the kitchen, Mother woke up. and she began to grumble in her sleep that I at night wandered here and there. Catherine said something without a word, and her words echoed somewhere far away. "Oh, let's go home." Finally sat down behind the wheel, Catherine. "We will not hurry. Let's go quietly." Here I was flying like crazy. It's good at least the roads are empty, and that I still do not know how to overtake normally. The car started and drove down the street toward the exit from the village. The girls were silent. Catherine realized that now is not the time for questioning. She kept thinking what horror Selena must have experienced, seeing her father, whom she thought was dead. Suddenly, Selena began to sob loudly and then cried again. Without saying anything, Catherine stopped the car, pulling to the curb. She remained silent, looking out the windshield, realizing that her friend just needed to cry. Catherine had given her that opportunity. When Selena had calmed down, they set off again. Already on the approach to the city, Selena spoke up herself. "Thank you, Catherine, for getting me out of there. In fact, I was really scared when I was alone at the train station, and even without money to get home." "Don't thank me, we are friends," Catherine replied, "and I offered you to take my car. Would not have had to endure so much." If only her friend knew how much Selena had to go through yesterday. She suddenly really wanted to share with Catherine, and the latter, as if sensing Selena's mood, asked, "Well, did you at least have a successful trip? Did you find answers to your questions?" "Found," said Selena sadly. "Only after these answers, questions became even more." "What do you mean?" "Don't talk in riddles. Rebuses are not my thing." Catherine looked at her friend carefully, then moved her gaze to the road. "Have you seen your father? He is not really dead. Alive and well and even feels very good," said Selena. "He lives in a luxurious house with a beautiful woman, drives an expensive car, does not give a shit that his family almost starved to death because of his debts." "No way," stretched out her friend. Selena briefly told her everything that had happened yesterday about Emma and her father, and how he'd driven her away. "I didn't think people could be so cruel to their loved ones," Catherine muttered. "You're his children." "Apparently they can," Selena replied in a philosophical tone. They had already arrived at her house. It was time to say goodbye. "Katusha, tell the Institute that I feel bad, that I'm sick," asked Selena and Katerina. "Sure, don't even worry." The friends said goodbye, and Selena wandered to her entrance. She wanted to take a hot shower and go to bed. Her mom was already awake. Seeing her daughter exhausted by a sleepless night and nervousness, she straightened her couch in the hall. When the girl came out of the bathroom, the woman did not question her about anything, silently went out and closed the door to the room so that Harvey, who had woken up, would not wake up her sister. Veronica also found out something. She did not sit idly by and try to find the old woman who had sold her daughter a box of photographs. She suspected that her dead husband's brother, Oliver, might have known about the old woman. After walking Harvey to school, the woman began to make soup, trying not to make any noise so as not to wake her daughter. She realized from the look on Selena's face that a lot had happened to her yesterday, so they would have something to talk about when her daughter woke up. Selena woke up in the afternoon. From the kitchen came Kolia's voice. "I don't want soup," refused to eat lunch boy. He studied in the first shift and had already returned from school, had to make cutlets with pasta. "Come on, eat," trying to speak quietly, ordered his mother. "In the evening, I'll make you cutlets with pasta, and now eat soup. You've been starving all day," shaking your empty guts. "You didn't eat in the school cafeteria again, did you?" "It's not good there," Selena's brother continued to whine unhappily. The girl took a robe from the back of the chair, threw it on, went to the kitchen. Very hungry to eat, and the aroma of chicken broth even more caused hungry salivation. "Good morning, everyone." Forgetting that she had already slept through lunch, Selena said. "What a morning," Harvey said indignantly. "Where have you been all night? Were you running to your beloved Avon again?" "No, I wasn't." Harvey jokingly slapped her brother on the forehead. "Chew on that and go to your room. Mom and I need to have a serious talk. Our conversation is not for children's ears." "Oh, found a child." Harvey considered himself all grown up and didn't like it when his sister pointed out that he was much younger than her. When he left, Veronica closed the door to the kitchen and sat down at the table with her daughter. Selena could see that her mother was waiting for news from her, but didn't know how to begin to tell her about the nightmare she had experienced yesterday in the unfamiliar village. Seeing her daughter's confusion, Veronica began her story. "When you left for the institute," said the woman, "I went to the flea market. According to the signs you described, I started looking for the old woman. While I was looking for her, I thought, just show your face to me, I'll shake your soul out of you. But I'll know everything about my dead husband." So I was walking, and I saw Victor's brother standing there talking to some gnarled old woman. He shoved money into her hands, and he went to the exit of the bazaar with quick steps. I rushed after him. Why? Selena didn't understand. Uncle Oliver had never been on good terms with her father. They were always quarreling, and her paternal grandmother had always loved Victor more than Oliver. The girl looked at her mother incomprehensively. I wouldn't even talk to him. Knowing our situation, he wouldn't even help us with a penny or a piece of bread. And he couldn't have known that we were being drained of our father's debts. He didn't know, Veronica continued, so I caught up with him, shouting, "Oliver, wait, stop." He turned around, recognized me, and wasn't surprised to see me. I asked him who the woman he was talking to was, and also what he'd given her the money for. Then Oliver said it was time to tell me all about my husband and invited me to the cafe. Oliver was the eldest in the family. Besides him, there was Victor, who was 3 years younger, and his sister Natalie, the youngest. The children had never been friendly with each other. In childhood, they constantly quarreled, taking away each other's toys, bicycles, and sweets. As they grew up, they started fighting over money. Oliver knew that his mother, Veronica's mother-in-law, was always helping Victor with money, giving it to him without asking him to give it back. To her eldest son, however, his mother gave nothing. He worked hard and independently built a house for his family. When Oliver learned about the death of his brother, he was very worried. Despite the fact that they were friends, never talked heart to heart, never spent time together, such an early and tragic death Oliver would not have wished an enemy. He sincerely mourned his brother in the cemetery, supported his mother, who killed with grief, all the time trying to lie on the grave, shouting, "Take me with you, son." I felt sorry for Oliver and the family of his dead brother. They saw each other rarely. He almost did not know Victor's children and did not communicate with his wife. With his brother, they were like strangers. That's why Oliver didn't go to Veronica after the funeral, just as he didn't go while his brother was alive. Twice a year, he went to his brother's grave on the date of his death and on Victor's birthday. He often met his mother and sister at the grave. One day, he happened to overhear their conversation. The women thought the man could not hear. He was going through something in the trunk of his car. Oliver, indeed, did not hear everything, but the essence of the conversation. He realized that Victor had not died at all, but had simply faked his death to hide from the debt collectors, who were shaking money out of him and threatening him with death. Victor had thought it all through. Victor's mother told her youngest daughter, "It's scary to think what would have happened to him if we hadn't helped him fake the accident. Those bandits would probably have killed him already." "Yes, Mom, it's good that he's safe now," answered the daughter. "When was the last time you saw him?" 2 months ago," answered the woman. "We met secretly at the train station. We can't let anyone know Victor is alive, or they'll be looking for him again." Oliver got a chill inside. He'd never felt much warmth for his mother and sister, but to realize they were such complete hypocrites was beyond him. He approached the women and asked one single question. "So the brother didn't die in the car accident then?" Mother and daughter were confused. Oliver's mother was the first to pull herself together. "What are you talking nonsense, son?" she ranted. "There he is, lying breathless in the grave. Our Victor is dead, gone prematurely in the prime of life, and we can only mourn him and carry flowers to this grave." "Enough, mother," Oliver interrupted her. "I've heard everything. You just said you met him 2 months ago at the train station." "You misunderstood, Oliver." The mother tried to justify herself. "I didn't meet him." At this point, the sister entered the conversation. "Mom, maybe you should stop hiding from Oliver that Victor is alive. He's still his own brother." Yes, so dear that they fought every day, did not give each other hands. The woman was indignant and angry, and Olivera would be the first to give his brother to the collectors. "You think badly of me, Mom," the man said, turned away, hurried to his car. He realized that all these years his relatives deceived him, did not trust the secret, and he, like a fool, went to his brother's grave, put it in order, put a stone monument and a fence on his own money. Oliver thought that even if they quarreled when he was alive, he would make sure that his brother's burial place looked decent. Did you believe him, Mom? Selena asked Veronica. It seemed unreal to her, what Uncle Oliver said. And you remember how grandmother had killed herself at the funeral, how she yelled at the cemetery, "Son, take me with you to the grave." That's the thing Veronica said. My mother-in-law never loved me. That's why she didn't trust me with the terrible secret of staging a car accident. But I did not even suspect what acting talents she possesses, because so played out the grief of his mother that even a skeptic would believe and laid down next to the grave to weep with her at the same time. That's right. Celine supported her mother. She remembered that day well and had not yet forgotten how his grandmother was writhing on her son's grave. So, Veronica continued, Oliver kept the news that his brother was alive for a long time, but it kept him awake. He started coming home to his mother's house more often to find any clues, to try to grasp at something that would lead him to his brother. He wanted to tell him what was going on in our family, how poor we were, how we were in debt. One day, Oliver noticed that his mother was going somewhere. In the hallway was a densely packed bag, closed tightly with a zipper. Oliver followed her and saw her meeting Victor in the park. He couldn't believe his eyes for a long time. His brother looked quite healthy, even a little better. When mother and son said goodbye, Oliver followed his brother and tracked down where he lived. He couldn't resist going up to him and saying something nasty. Oliver resented the fact that Victor had the conscience to deceive everyone, while he lived in a beautiful house. A few days later, Oliver came to the village again, bringing his camera with him. He took a few pictures. In his heart, Oliver wanted to take revenge on his brother and show the pictures to his wife, but he didn't dare to do it. He's a coward like Victor, a hypocrite like their mother, Veronica said, but the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And they also say that oranges don't come from aspens. Selena agreed with her mother. Yeah, that's right. Oliver preferred, like his relatives, to shift responsibility to other people, continuing to tell. Veronica poured tea for her daughter, moved the vase with jam. They all used to do everything by the hands of others. He couldn't wait to tell me that I wasn't a widow, but he was afraid. So he hired that old woman. He watched our family, knew almost everything about our lives. He knew which way you went to the bus stop to get to the institute and which way you came back. But he wanted to show me the pictures first. Oliver would pay an old woman to hit on me on the street under the guise of a psychic. When she did, Veronica yelled at the old woman and swung her bag at her so hard that she hurried away. Selena's mother was not a cowardly and indecisive person. She hated beggars and all those who tried to fool people's heads with predictions. Oliver's attempt failed. Then he decided to act through Selena. The old woman caught up with you and handed you the damn box, and you bought it from her out of the goodness of your heart, thinking she couldn't afford to buy food. Yes, that's what I thought, Selena confirmed. I remember hunger. I always feel sorry for people who are in trouble. Your kind heart is the reason why this box of pictures appeared in our house. That's the whole story, and then you can tell me the rest. Wait, Mom, interrupted her daughter, but Uncle Oliver, he's what? And that Uncle Oliver, he apologized to me for a long time. He said that he himself knew nothing, that if that accidentally overheard conversation, he would still consider his brother dead. Realizing that the conversation will now continue, and it will be long, Veronica again put the kettle on the stove to heat. He hated his brother, always wanted to hurt him. By revealing this terrible secret to us, he has his own agenda first and foremost. Oliver wants us to tell the police and the debt collectors that your father's alive. That's gonna hurt Victor, and it's not like Oliver had anything to do with it. I'm telling you, the whole family are cowards who can't solve their own problems. Do you believe that Uncle Oliver didn't know? The girl asked. 50-50, the mother replied, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's lying, if they were all working together on a plan to stage Victor's death. Oliver's just afraid to admit it. Mom, I feel like this isn't happening to us, like we're watching a movie. Unfortunately, we are, daughter. Selena shook her head. In turn, Selena also spoke about the information she had received. She told her mother how she had met Emma, her father's new wife. She didn't immediately understand me. At first, she thought I was one of those salesmen who go door to door and offer to buy all sorts of nonsense, Selena said. But then she invited me in and even fed me. She must be a good woman, Veronica said. But I didn't recognize my father. I saw nothing but coldness and anger in his gaze. Just imagine, he just chased me out of the house, threw me out the door like a kitten. Veronica's heart ached. She could imagine how her daughter felt. Her own father, who she had lost in childhood, for whom she had suffered so much, did not even ask her how she lived, how she finished school, how she entered the institute. What is going on in the fate of his daughter? And after all, she is his own blood, his first child. Veronica loved her children very much. With every cell of her body, she felt when they were bad, when they suffered, and also suffered with them. She would never have let anyone hurt Lara or Harvey, but there was a mean man who didn't care about the children at all. She didn't know what to say to Selena, and she hesitated for a moment, then said quietly but firmly, "And you kick him out of your memory, just as he chased you out of the door. Forget about him, daughter. Maybe that will make life easier." "I will, Mom," Selena promised. The next day she went to the institute. It was the last year of her studies, the most important. Selena hoped to graduate with a red diploma, so she took her studies seriously. Evan was waiting for her at the entrance. "Hi," as if nothing had happened, said the guy. "Hello," the girl answered him. Selena stopped fooling around. "Come on, come back to my place." The girl looked at him and slowly walked towards the institute. Evan followed her. Evan tried to take her hand, but Selena pulled it away. "Put it in her pocket. Don't fool around, Selena. After the institute, I'll help you to bring back the things you took. We'll live like before. I'm bored without you, do you understand?" Suddenly, the guy changed his tone, and in general, "I come home to eat nothing to eat. The room is a mess. Things clean and ironed soon will not be left at all, in what I will go to lectures and to friends." He's not even trying to apologize, Selena thought. The guy didn't think he'd offended her at all, showing his not-so-facetious side. "I'm not going back, Evan," she muttered. The girl stopped and looked into Evan's eyes. "You know, I've realized a lot in the last few days. You are not capable of love. It is more important for you to use people to make your own life comfortable. I don't meet such a person. Sooner or later you will betray me, and I don't want that." Selena walked down the path, opened the door to the institute building, and hid behind it. "Go to hell," Evan cursed angrily. After the lectures, Catherine and Selena went to the park. There was a small summer cafe where the girls liked to drink coffee and eat ice cream. Despite the fact that it was September, the cafe had not closed yet. The weather was perfect, sunny and warm. Selena really liked the way the park looked in September. It was completely immersed in the gold of the fall leaves. Rustling underfoot, they had a soothing effect on the girl. Sitting at a table in the cafe and waiting for their order, the friends talked quietly. "What are you and Mom now going to do?" asked Catherine. "Nothing," answered Selena. "We will live as we lived. This year I will have to work more part-time, but I will manage. I will get a diploma and go to work on a permanent job. Life will be more stable." "Don't you want to take revenge on your father for all the grief he caused you?" "No, this is not a solution. To resemble scoundrels, scoundrels. Hypocrites is not on the method," smiled Selena. "And Evan, what did you decide with him?" "Did not restrain, did not stop asking questions, Catherine." "With Evan we parted," answered the friend, feeling how from these aloud-spoken words she becomes easier on the soul. "You see, Catherine, Evan does not need me. He needs a nanny and a lover in one person. And I still want to be happy myself. Maybe I'll meet a man who will love me for real, will care, not insult me. Evan couldn't even break up properly. He insulted me again and sent me to hell. He didn't even realize that I could live perfectly well without him." The friends talked for a long time, but time was running out and we had to break up. I'll give you a ride home," Catherine offered. "No, thank you, dear. I want to walk," Selena refused. She went to the bus stop. Walking through the place where the old woman sold her a box of photographs, the girl noticed a familiar figure. She leisurely approached the old woman. "Hello," Selena said with a smile. The grandmother looked at her with an attentive gaze. At first it seemed to the girl that she did not recognize her, did not remember that student, whom she almost forced to buy the thing. But the old woman remembered her perfectly well. Did you recognize the secret? She asked. Grandma did, Selena replied. Doesn't it make you feel better? The old woman asked. Yes, Selena agreed. Then by a kitten, the grandmother took out a fluffy lump with big eyes from under her coat. The kitten was barely a month old. It's a puerile little kitten looking at Selena. It will bring you happiness. Selena opened her purse, took out her wallet, and handed the grandmother a bill. I don't have any more, she said. And I have enough. The old woman handed the girl the animal. Selena gently cuddled it to her and walked leisurely in the direction of her house. And the old woman waved her hand, quietly whispered, "He will bring you happiness." As she approached the entryway, Selena noticed that the light in the kitchen was on. Probably Mom is cooking dinner, the girl thought. I'm here, she shouted, opening the door with her key. Who's home? Harvey ran out to meet her. What are you yelling about? Mom's having some important conversation in the kitchen. She sent me away, told me to be quiet in the room, the boy warned her sister. He noticed a kitten in her hands. Oh, how tiny! The guy's voice sounded a few tones higher. He was practically squeaking, admiring the creature in Selena's hands. Where did you get it? Let me hold it. Do you think Mom will let me keep him? Here, said the girl, holding out the kitten to her brother, and go to your room since Mom told you to. So she really does have serious business. Who's in the kitchen? I don't know, some woman. My brother walked down the hall. When Selena entered the kitchen, she was speechless. Sitting at the same table as her mom was Emma. They were drinking tea, talking. Selena came from the institute, exclaimed Veronica. Come in, daughter. Sit down. Or rather Emma needs to talk to you. Hello, Selena, smiled the woman. Good evening. Not understanding anything, replied the girl. She pulled out a stool from under the table, hesitantly sat down. And how did you find us? You wrote me your phone number, said the woman, and her face was smiling. And I have serious connections that can easily find out any information about a person. And to get his address, find out his phone number, it's a matter of minutes. I thought I'd never see you again, Selena said, surprised. But I thought I'd never see you again. But I immediately realized that you and I will meet again, Emma said, which further confused the girl. You know, daughter, Veronica said, Emma is just as you described her, a very sweet and cordial woman. But it was our father who made her unhappy. Not understanding anything, Selena looked at her mother and then at the guest. Yes, that's how it is in life, dear. Emma continued the conversation. I thought everything was settled in my life. After hard years of life with my first husband, after his beatings and abuse, I met a decent man with whom I can meet my old age. Selena's mom laughed good-naturedly. It is unlikely. Next to people like Victor, old age is not in joy, rotten man, said Veronica. But it didn't seem so to me at first. I even sincerely thought that I had fallen in love with him. It seems uneconomic, and at home a lot can do. True, he did not really like my father, but he always put up with my desires, because the main thing for the parent of the only daughter that she was happy. So he put up with it, but he came to visit less often. He was not happy to see Victor. Veronica poured tea. Selena asked Emma, would you like some more hot tea? No, Veronica. Thank you. She covered the cup with her palm. Celine noticed the expensive makeup, smooth skin, and several rings adorning Emma's long fingers. We would have lived like this with Victor if Selena hadn't shown up. The woman looked at the girl meaningfully. I didn't really want her to go after my father. Something told me that the information the daughter received could be poison, and it would hurt her a lot, the girl's mother said, propping her head up with her palm. She wasn't the only one, Emma said, but when I watched Victor's behavior with his daughter, it was heartbreaking. How much cruelty to his own child was revealed in him. And it wasn't Selena's fault. It was very painful for me to hear my husband's words when he shouted, swore, and threw the girl out of our house. I already realized then that I will not live with Victor, but I will definitely meet Selena. So you broke up with my father? Selena asked. Yes, but let's talk about everything in order. When Victor kicked Selena out of the house, Emma took the girl's cell phone number and returned to the kitchen. Her husband, as if nothing had happened, was heating up cutlets in the microwave. The face that had just been angry was calm again, as if absolutely nothing had happened in his life. Emma didn't know how to begin the difficult conversation about her husband's past. She hoped he would tell her everything, try to explain, justify himself. but the man remained silent. Then she decided to be the first to speak. "Why didn't you ever tell me that you had a wife and 2 children?" Emma asked. "Would it change anything?" Victor answered with a question. "They have nothing to do with you. They are in my past." "So why don't you tell me about your past? I basically know nothing about you. All information about you, as it turns out, is under a veil of secrecy." Victor didn't like the conversation Emma had started, but he tried to keep his cool, not to be rude to his wife. In the time he'd lived in her house, he'd grown accustomed to a sweet, carefree life. Sometimes he returned to his hometown to see his mother. This connection each time gave him the assurance that he was no longer wanted. Everyone considered Victor dead. And then Selena appeared out of nowhere. Victor did not understand how she could know that he was alive, how she found his address, but deep down he felt that sooner or later his secret would be revealed. Any information can only remain reliably secret when only one person possesses it. And what 2 people know, everyone knows, seems to be the popular wisdom. His mother and his sister knew that Victor was not dead. When the man came to his mother and told her that he was being chased by bandits, the woman was worried. Natalie was home that day too. The 3 of them sat down in the kitchen and began to think about how Victor could get away from the debt collectors. "You should go away," the sister suggested. "It's useless," her brother replied. "Those people are so powerful that they will find me even in Chicago. You can't hide from them anywhere. So we must convince them that there is no one else to collect debts from," said the man's mother. "What do you mean?" Brother and sister didn't understand. "Convince them that you're dead, no man, no debts." The 3 of them sat up until the morning, thinking over a plan of action. Burying a living person was not so easy. The most appealing plan seemed to be a car accident. "You should direct the car from the bridge. But at this time it is important to have time to open the door to get out," advised his mother. "Otherwise, underwater you cannot open and drown, die for real." Victor was scared for a moment. He was afraid to die in this crazy adventure, but he was even more afraid of the collectors. "You will succeed, son," his mother encouraged him. "And then when everything settles down, you will be able to live in peace. Natasha and I will do our best to make your funeral as realistic as possible." The sister nodded her head, agreeing with her mother. The plan had succeeded. Victor's body was not found. There was no one to bury him. The man was listed as missing. Then the man's mother went for a trick. She went to the investigator, almost lying at the feet of the policeman, begging him to change the status of her missing son. "He must have been swept away by the current. I'm sure my son drowned, choked by the river water. He was afraid of water since childhood, could not swim," sobbed inconsolable mother in the investigator's office. "Help the poor mother change the status of her son. I beg you. If you do not do this, we will not be able to make a grave in the cemetery. I don't have long to live in this world, but every day I want to come to this grave and mourn my son." She managed to convince the policeman. He changed her status and issued documents for the deceased Victor. So the woman went to her daughter-in-law and said, "Victor's body has not been found and is unlikely to be found, but we must make a burial ground so that there will be a place to come to honor him. You look for things of your husband, which were especially dear to him, which he loved when he was alive. We'll put them in the coffin and bury them, and we'll come to this grave with flowers to remember Victor." Veronica was surprised at the affectionate tone of her mother-in-law, who had never loved her son's wife, but took pity on her and agreed to bury Victor's things in the grave. The day of the funeral was appointed. The mother of Veronica's husband was out of her mind with grief, sobbing, falling to the ground, beating her head against the cross, set on a mound of cemetery earth. Her grief looked so natural that no one could suspect anything. Victor himself was present at his own funeral. Hiding behind the monuments, he watched from afar as the funeral procession went on, as the coffin was lowered into the grave, as his mother sobbed and his wife wiped away her tears. "It's all worked out," he triumphed. Everything changed when he saw his daughter in his house. Victor realized she can tell or has already told everything to his wife. She would definitely publicize the information because the woman did not know that her husband wanted to be considered dead in order to hide from debts. She will run, chalking her heels with happiness to the police to return him to the status of a living person and cancel the hard-won documents of Victor's mother. Everything he has now could float away from his hands. Emma stared at her husband, waiting for an answer, and he, like some movie on TV, was reviewing the pictures from his funeral. He was quite satisfied with a happy and carefree life with this beautiful woman, and he was also satisfied with the fact that she could not have children. The birth of heirs was no longer part of his life plans, but the man liked to live in his wife's beautiful house, drive an expensive car. Selling it could ruin his life. There would be debt collectors again. Despite the passage of so many years, these people do not forgive debts. They will even get them from the grave. I'm surprised they didn't do it. They would have found out Victor wasn't dead. Darling, he spoke to Emma in an affectionate tone. It's true that my past is complicated. Seeing my daughter has knocked me out, disturbed my peace. Let me calm down and I'll tell you everything in great detail in the next few days. Okay, Emma agreed. And in the evening, when the woman was about to go to bed, she heard that her husband was talking to someone on the phone, trying to speak quietly so that his wife would not hear. No, you don't understand. We have to take out all three of them. The woman, the girl, and the boy. What do you mean? Take them out. For good, so that no one will find them. Emma realized that Victor wanted to kill his wife, daughter, and son and had asked someone for that favor. The woman's heart was racing. She suddenly remembered Selena's sad face as tears rolled silently down her cheeks from her eyes. The girl was suffering. She had been through so much, and this bastard wanted to kill her relatives so that no one would know this secret. When her husband fell asleep, Emma went down to the garden. She entered the gazebo, sat down on the sofa, dialed her father's phone number. The woman's father was a man of influence and never refused his daughter's requests. She could only tell him about the situation Emma was in. Emma, Daddy, I'm sorry to wake you up, but this is very important. Her father was always ready to listen to his favorite daughter. The information she gave him went straight to the police department. The investigator who had long ago dealt with the case of the dead man was urgently summoned. Before morning, he managed to raise the documents, remember all the details, and prepare for Victor's arrest. Barely had the sun had time to light up the sky, Emma and Victor's house rang. The woman opened, letting the police officers in. Are you Victor? The investigator asked the still awake man. I am, he answered uncertainly, but what do you want? Victor felt the danger. He was finished. He was about to be arrested. You are under arrest on charges of faking your own death and a number of other charges. Follow us. Yes, of course, but it's a misunderstanding. Victor tried to buy time. We'll find out in the department whether it's a misunderstanding or not. The investigator clearly cut off his attempt to evade. Let me at least get dressed. I can't go in my pajamas, Victor asked. Yes, of course, replied the policeman. You have 5 minutes. The man turned around and started to go up the stairs. Emma looked after him. Perhaps now she was seeing her husband for the last time. Suddenly there was a noise in the yard. It turned out that having gone up to the bedroom on the second floor, Victor had tried to escape by climbing down from the balcony, but the police officers who had stayed on the street were waiting for him downstairs. The man was loaded into a car with bars on the windows and taken to the city. I was very sad and unpleasant to look at all this, Emma said, concluding the story, but when I imagined what would happen to you, I clearly realized that I was doing the right thing. The fact that he escaped from debt is a separate issue, but to order the murder of his own children, that's a real atrocity. People like that shouldn't be allowed to go free. Selena listened to the woman, eyes wide. Daddy, whom she remembered kind, affectionate, cheerful, already showed his other side. But the girl couldn't imagine that he could do that to his family. Had they suffered little through his fault, little lived in starvation, giving his debts to debt collectors, but to kill. It was beyond her comprehension. That's not all the news I want to tell you about. Emma continued, yesterday I went to the investigator, found out everything about Victor's past. The man turned out to be quite talkative, especially he was in a great mood from the fact that he was able to close the hanging, which spoiled his reputation for many years. The management of the investigator every now and then reminded him of this high-profile and resonant case, and now it will be sent for further investigation. The guilty will be punished. The woman asked the investigator to find out which of the collectors could have hunted Victor. The profession is not so common. It was impossible to imagine that there was a whole staff of such employees in the city. The investigator quickly got information about those who go to the wife of the arrested Victor. Then Emma headed toward them. Arrogant-looking men did not immediately want to listen to Emma, but she called her father, and in 10 minutes she was invited to the office of the head of the collection firm. She told everything to the important and rather fat man sitting across from her, and then asked, "Please tell me how much money your employees were able to collect from the woman whose husband had allegedly died." The supervisor thought for a moment, then stood up and walked over to a large cabinet with glass doors. From there, he took out a large folder, sat down in his seat, and began to study the debtor's file. Emma waited patiently. Then the man took a piece of paper and wrote a sum on it, handed it to the woman. Emma's eyes went wide and her heart raced. She grew up in a poor family. Her father held an important position and was always in leadership positions. Emma herself had no problems with money. She could afford a lot, but when she saw the amount, she almost fainted. Even for her, the amount written on a piece of paper by the head of the collection agency was cosmic, prohibitive. How could a poor woman pay such money for her husband without starving herself and her children? Emma thought. All evening she had not found a place for herself, wandering about the house from room to room, going from corner to corner. She didn't know how to help that humble girl, her mother and brother who had suffered so much in their lives because of Victor. She even felt guilty that she had given that bastard almost 10 years of a cloudless, carefree life. Everything the man wanted, Emma presented to him on a silver platter. He knew no refusal in anything. The woman never counted how much money he spent from her bank account. Finally, a good idea came into her head, as Emma herself thought. The woman sat down in her chair and dialed her father's number. "Emma, Daddy, we need to help some very good people." Veronica and Selena listened to Emma in silence. They had questions as the new information came in, but they didn't interrupt the woman, seeing how hard this story was for her. Emma reached into her bag that hung on the kitchen door handle and pulled out some papers. "This is the deed to my house. It's in your name." She turned to Veronica. "My house is worth a lot of money. My father helped me to draw up the document quickly through a notary. I, in turn, went to a real estate agency and agreed to sell the property." Veronica and Selena did not immediately understand what Emma was getting at. The woman was silent for a while, looking at the papers spread out in front of the girl's maw. "This house belongs to you now, Veronica," she said, "and you can sell it and buy the children an apartment in a good neighborhood. That way they'll have their own place. Or you can go and live in this house. It has all the facilities, a big garden, and even a swimming pool." Emma smiled, and Veronica and Selena looked at her in bewilderment. "Believe me, this is the smallest fraction of what I can do for you. I can't bear to think that while you were starving, depriving yourself of the most basic necessities, I was essentially making Victor comfortable. It hurts me so much to think about it. That's why I made the decision to give you this house. It's up to you what you do with it. Any help you need from me." Gradually coming to their senses, mother and daughter began to smile. And then Veronica asked Emma worriedly, "Where will you live?" "Don't worry about me. You forgot that I have a luxurious, huge apartment in the center of the city." The woman reassured them. "Frankly speaking, I never liked to live outside the city in this village. It was Victor who persuaded me. Now I understand why he had to." "Thank you so much. You're an incredible woman." Selena walked over to Emma and hugged her. She suddenly felt that this woman was very dear to her, very close, very kind. "That's not all," Emma said. She opened a beautiful leather purse with rhinestones and took out a plastic card. "This is for you, Veronica." She handed the card to the woman. "There is a certain amount of money in this account. I think it will be enough for you to live comfortably, to be able to finish your son's schooling, and to help him get ahead in life." "No, not at all." Veronica tried to refuse the gift, waving her hands. "Take it. I am very pleased to do something nice for you. I need to understand that you will not need anything more. Every month, the card balance will be replenished. I'll take care of it." All three of them hugged each other. Tears of joy rolled down Veronica's face. Several months passed. Veronica and Selena sold Emma's house and bought 2 one-bedroom apartments. Selena moved into one of them. The other was waiting for Harvey to grow up. The girl was settling in. She was happy that her mother was not poor, thanks to Emma, and she had her own cozy nest. On the first day, Selena brought Silly with her. That's what she called the kitten an old woman had sold her at the flea market. Silly, Selena called loudly to her pet. "Where are you hiding, little one?" She walked around boxes of things, bulks, bags. The things were not yet unpacked, probably crawled into one of the boxes and sleeps there peacefully. The girl began to open the boxes one by one as she suddenly heard a knock on the door. She opened it. On the threshold stood a handsome young man. In his hands he was holding Silly. "Hello, I'm your neighbor. Isn't that your cute little creature on my balcony?" The man handed the kitten to Selena. "Come to me, you're my happiness," said the girl, smiling.